Good evening. Welcome to Outside the Box Open Forum. It's not quite so open tonight because we got a powerhouse guest on, someone I've been looking forward to having a chat with for a very long time. And it's so wonderful that we get blessed with some beautiful minds at this table. And you know how picky I am. Yes, I'm a bitch. But anyway, a little truth disclaimer. Anything that's said here tonight is not the opinion of others, however, it should be. That being said, there's a disclaimer. It's if you can't handle the truth, well, there's the other disclaimer. If you can't handle the truth, don't hang out here because problem truth is you got to stand in it. And if you don't stand in it, the universe is going to bring you to your knees until you figure it out, right? So there you go. So wonderful tonight to have Sevan Bomar here, and oh my God, we're gonna have some fun tonight. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Like I said, I'm just keeping my jets cool right now. I know I got 3 hours in, and I'm just feeling great today. Obviously, I did a little bit of preparation for today's show, only in the sense of just keeping my mind clear. And obviously, this is something that I love to do. I very seldom get a 3-hour stretch to do it in, though. So I'm excited because obviously I've reviewed your work. And let me just tell you how it happened kind of on my end is that obviously anything that's worth reading on the internet, I've either read it or it's in my database just waiting for me to completely cover it. And I actually got a message from someone on Facebook, a lady, I wish I knew her name. She's been quite a dear. And she said, I like your write-up on blah, 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 and I also like Kate's write-up on blah, blah, blah. And I was like, let me see this write-up. And I got a chance to check out the website again. And then when I saw it, I said, oh, yeah, I know Kate. And I could remember reaching out and us connecting about 1.5 years ago, and you were just giving me the message about, hey, I'm into this etymology thing, too. And then so 1.5 years later, I'm like, okay, the Black's Law Dictionary, how did I miss that? Okay. And then looking in there and then, oh, this is the last piece to the entire puzzle, particularly on this plane. And so, yeah, that's kind of been the process. And obviously, it's just something that's supposed to happen. I think that I've always been a champ at showing my flexibility in every single arena. And so I would really like tonight to scan the entire gambit and us all to come out of this with something even more expansive than what we came in with. And so that's my intentions.
Oh, absolutely. Perfect. Love it. There's some wonderful irony there. I've said this on air quite a few times. It's people like you, Mark Passio, and a handful of others, as I was saying, Bill Donahue, Sana Bonacci, the researchers in this sort of stuff that I don't do a lot of reading anymore. I just do a lot of scanning of things, and I'm looking at things from an allegorical perspective. So I just basically need to read a headline, and I get everything I need.
Right.
And you and the handful of others are the ones I actually go to check the Akashic downloads to make sure I'm on the right track. And it's amazing. It really is amazing.
It is.
You have these epiphanies, and it's like, whoa, that's really cool. And then, I'm scanning around, and I'll come across some of your work, and I'm hearing the same things. And I'm hearing people coming back to me, and I'm sure you've heard it many times yourself, coming back to me saying, have you read Walter Russell's work? Have you read this or that and the other? I said, no, I haven't actually. And saying the same thing. And that for me is a confirmation of putting everything into the intuitive.
Right. And definitely getting on that stream of truth for sure. And actually, we're in tense, in every tense saying the same thing. And it's like, that's of course the confirmation that's what gives us the confidence that we need, of course, to understand that we're on the right path. And then beyond that, which is where I've been starting to really find a great deal of fruit, there's now putting together the pieces of why all of this is happening, because I've seen so many synchronicities now that it really, really would destroy my mind more to believe that something wasn't going on than to understand that something is actually going on. So the question is, of course, what is it? And I definitely want to tackle that question tonight and get this I think what is a next level of message for humanity is so funny because it's almost like I'm in another world that is, not the world I was in before, just only in the sense that this one's completely malleable. It's like once you see what the alternative is to truth, you really are not going to be impressed anyway. So you know that once people start getting the truth, then they're going to become attracted to it because it has a lot more energy to it. It's not a vortex that's just sucking them. So, it's just one of these things that it's metamorphosizing, and then it's only a matter of time before it comes into full bloom.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I love your use of the word understand, because that's exactly what people need to do. They need to get in and stand,
Right.
right? To stand within themselves, right?
For
So,
sure.
and I like referencing two favorite books for referencing are the Bible, and certainly not from a religious viewpoint. Oh my God, did they screw that up? But anyway, and Black's Magic book, Black's Law Magic, right?
Right.
And we have a certain way of reading it that's really powerful.
Right.
How to read Black's Law. This is I haven't said this to people for a while, so I'm glad it's coming up tonight. For those that want to understand how to read Black's Magic book properly, if you have something that keeps resonating with you in your Yellow Brick Road walk, all your coincidences and synchronicities that show up, if there's something that jumps out at you, some word or whatever, go look it up in Black's Law. Now, the word may not be there, but look where it should be.
Right.
And then follow the rule, as above, so below. Read the definition above where it should have been and below, and your answer will be right there.
Exactly.
I'm not kidding. It's just that easy.
Right.
And this one is a tough pill for people to swallow because we've been so ingrained and entrained with, programs to doubt ourselves at every turn. And for me, the turning in the road for myself, and I would say for everyone, is to lose that doubt and
Right.
start really empowering yourself into it.
Well, it's also like doing it, they're even getting it the reverse way now, because I would definitely say the reverse way of getting this knowledge and information is to try to solve it all and to try to figure out everything. And this is kind of like, to me, going in the opposite direction from reverse engineering, basically saying, okay, because it says this means this has to be going on. And this means that these kind of people or beings that you're dealing with. And you could just keep reverse engineering it. And then, it gets so powerful when you get good, as we always say in a certain tense, when you get really proficient at looking at the sentences, you can extract, especially if someone writes the sentence, you can actually extract everything about them, because you can assume that then if they made that statement, then this is where their mind is stationed at this point. And it's quite a different way of looking at things. I believe that it empowers a person more because it's internal. It doesn't leave them to try to connect things on an external level to make sense of it. It becomes like a cipher or a wheel that you're tumbling yourself in your mind. And then obviously, we do know this is a greater system. So once the pieces really do come together, it unlocks all subsequent levels. And then the healing starts. I would say that for sure, as far as our purification process, only in the sense of that we're flying into the face of ourselves on an oversoul level, and it just burns off so much of the BS and so much of the untruth, because that's obviously what fire is designed to do, or heat is designed to do. You get the purest of metals, and I think that working in the mind is the real alchemy, and it's kind of purging all of what you believe to be true, all your judgments, all of your identities, etc., to throwing them in the fire, which is kind of one of the processes I went personally through when I first started this heavy level of the spiritual path, which started about 7 or 8 years ago. But there was extinguishing of all old pictures and things like that, and I started noticing when you go into the old photo album, you see yourself with the Archon, Winnie the Pooh, and Goofy, and all the rest of the Disney mandala creatures, and you see yourself in there in the mind control. And if when you start to really understand this system of magic, like we often remark that, when you turn on the Disney Channel, you only get magic. And this sub-law, which is just very, very difficult for people who are looking for something external to perceive, or at least the throughput between something going on being external rather than internal or invisible. And it's that slight realm or that octave below what we can see, and the octave octave above what we can see, that is, in a sense, the back room to what's happening in this reality. And I was talking about this today with a great friend of mine in regards to how people now have counted the colors on the prism, or when the light is shining into the prism, as 7 colors, and forgetting that white and black are colors. And then, because the common knowledge is, oh well, no, black is the absence of color, or white is the absence of color. No, actually, clear is the absence of color. You have white and black also, who are playing as almost like the boss on each end of the spectrum. But that does give you 9 when you 7 plus 2, and so that lets you understand the Enneagram and the power of how that works on this dimension. But it's interesting, because if there's a hard coding, meaning there's 7 days in the week, then what happens is the entire firmware of the reality that you're in is soaked in basically a program. Not necessarily a program with errors, though. And I heard you talk about that today in regards to, if you choose to patronize the name, if you choose to utilize the fraud, basically, and you become that, and you think it's you. You look in the mirror and you say, "This is me," even though if you look at anyone with a third eye open, it gets real strange. It's now going into, and not just skip things around here, but just it's now going into saying, all right, well, there's going to always be a difference between what a person says that is not experiencing the awakening versus what a person is going to say when they're experiencing the awakening. And this is also that synchronistic connection that you were talking about earlier. When you go and check in, basically it's like pinging. You're not necessarily going to accept what the person is saying or ideas, but if it does match yours, then you got to match. So it's interesting, though, because when you send that ping out to at least beacons that are firm, or beacons that that are actually going to shine true and guide you to where, actually not so much as guiding you, letting you know that you went in the right direction, more or less. And so what happens is that the conversation and the communication that's going on that wavelength, the wavelength of truth, is going to render certain things that no one's ever going to have heard of before. And this has the effect of, in a certain sense, causing a rift between the individuals that are experiencing it versus the other ones that are basically, they're reading stuff, adding maybe a little bit of their own fiction to it, and then they publish that or say that. And then they read some more stuff, and then they keep doing it. And meanwhile, the person they got it from did the same thing. The person they got it from did the same thing. Like what they were saying about that book, The Crystal Connection, and how that became the authority for most crystal books that were written after that for at least the next 10 to 15 years, right? And so when we go into now seeing that our work, especially in the future, will become in itself a study that says, well, what impact did this have on this reality, the insertion of this level of knowledge? Because this comes when you're not playing around, when it's not really about what everyone else is doing to whether you're going to reincarnate or figure out what that's even about or become a time lord, et cetera, et cetera. It's strictly something that has to do with you. And I find like this situation really occurs most in individuals who have been alone or have been in situations where they feel isolated from everything, and it forces them to look in. And this experience in introspection, as it's better called, renders the most potent cures for realities such as these. So I just want to let people know, the ones that especially do a lot of externalization to look for the situation, understand the energy that is surrounded in when you're sending that energy back in. And this is the difference between centripetal and centrifugal, which of course Dan Winter's more superior at explaining. But it basically means which way are you spinning, that there is still something going on here. There's a magnetic and there's an electric. There is an energy system that you're sitting on top of. It's a powerhouse, a mental, spiritual, and physical body. Whenever you can't do something physically, like let's say physically fly yourself, not in a plane, but your own body, then you can always jump into the astral body and take off flying. So what this is like then is that if you run into a roadblock in your reality, the physical, spiritual, mental one, the reason why we created these other bodies was we could go around. This, of course, is shown on the Caudacious staff. You can go around that point that may be blocked, and then do the same thing that you were attempting to do obviously because you're blocked, that means you didn't achieve something. You can do what you needed to achieve in another spectrum and then go up, meaning graduate because of that experience, because they're all just experiences, and then jump back into where you left off on if it was the physical plane, but leaving your law, your rule, your block, your standard behind. And this is like the navigator's dream then. It's where we call it blink. It's like when an obstacle comes, you can blink or come out of the dimension long enough for that obstacle to come and go. And then you come back unscathed. And we are so fast that we're doing this all the time with our thoughts. And there's just certain things that we need to understand about us because we're heavy beings. Like we're giants and titans compared to a great deal of the life forms that love to be minuscule. The reality is that because everything here is energy, which has a very deep meaning, if you just think of then what is beyond energy, meaning when you say everything is energy, what has to happen next? The only thing that can happen next, if you know that everything is energy, is that the energy must be divided. Meaning that when we determine what something is, which is really what the language, this is obviously a very rudimentary, half D-moving language that we're on right now, so it doesn't flow very well. But when you're shaping and molding and fashioning light, because now this is that light on the spectrum, including white and black, this is called a light worker. A light worker can easily become a light trapper. And so what I want to talk about today also is about the ancient knowledge that through archetypes such as Thoth Hermes, the writing of things that were only remembered, that were never allowed outside the mind into physical realms. What occurs when you get this kind of high level knowledge released into a reality where you get like the comic book or the video game or the cartoon that says, oh my goodness, never let such a powerful weapon fall into the hands of evil. Now, what is evil? Evil is ignorance. And what is ignorance? Ignorance means not to know. So when you let this high level of information fall into the hands of someone who misinterprets it, like even deeper layers within the Bible about the ark, which is the gap between two metallic forms in order to birth it into a water pool and creating high spin or energy of higher resonances and creating energy fields, then it becomes understood as that. But when you're looking from the netherworld, which is the place between our mind and heaven and earth, which is our mind and our spirit, not our mind, our body and our spirit, the netherworld, just clarify, exists in our minds. There is a riddle that says there's a place between heaven and earth. Okay, if you take the icons then and you say, well, what is heaven? Heaven then has to be the spirit. And then you say earth. Earth has to be the body. So where's the place in between? The mind. So in the minds, which is basically every bit of MINDS, in the minds, you have this constant work of seeding and constant drama, or the dragon mother. You have all of these different things that are interacting or acting out on each other because everything is trying to attract something. Now, if you ask a person, are you trying to attract something? They will have to say yes because they have aspirations. There's things that they want to do. So when you are attempting to attract something, that means you're attempting to catch it. And this begins a very deep level of what we can call karma, dharma, what we can call existence, what we can call whatever. But it's basically like a ping pong game where it's a tit for tat. Everything that you pull from it, the reincarnations, the different worlds, the different experiences, is what you have to put back into it. And this kind of gets us into, the title of today's show, somewhat, I did title it, it was Galactic Banking. It was to examine, which I've already done obviously, but examine whether or not the synthetic monetary system and also oath binding and pact system that is present within this particular dimension may or may not be something that is plagiarized directly and also, of course, corrupted from nature and the universe. Meaning, who taught this to who man? Because the knowledge that we're looking at, reverse engineering how long it would take to be able to comprehend the depth of such sigils and symbols, would equate to a being that has an infinite existence, more like unbegotten, rather than something that was created. And this is where we start looking at words as symbols themselves, not just because of their shapes, but words like open. You get O and you get a pin. So you get a circle and you get a pentagram, and you can draw that, and that means a portal. So there's all these other words, which, I've detailed a lot of them. It's something that I have to publish on the side of, but a lot of words that when I pulled them apart on a geometric level, I was able to draw them back out to see the next level of the depth of what is going on here with these MEs. Meaning, there is, I like in the show you talk about the whore Babylon, and it really gets me going. I crack up about it. And because obviously the Babylonian whore is tied into quite a few different characters, but one of them is Inanna. And Inanna goes through a process of being stripped of her powers. And the beginning of this riddle is that first of all, if you can be stripped of anything, then it's not yours anyway. This is what I talked about in the message about saving your inner treasures or keeping your inner treasure protected from pirates. Because if you store up a great deal of investments in a plane that you don't have as a great deal of mastery over, which is, of course, mastery over the physical plane is mastery over the body. If you don't have as much mastery over that, then something that does have as much mastery can supplant or rob or take away what you have, trick you out of it, only on the physical plane, though. It's like if you lose your arm in the physical plane, it's not gone on the spiritual plane. The Curlian camera shows it's still there. So this, of course, let's dock here a little bit, literally. And I obviously know that you have a great deal of input on this as far as the vessels on land, the Merovingian Sea, maritime laws. Definitely the Venusian connection with it, also the Voodoo connection with Europe. This definitely gets us deep into why they would even write such a book, and what is the stage of what's happening in our universe. How long has it been going on, and then definitely when is it going to stop? And the great thing about today is that just like 2012, we can choose when we want to have a 2012. Like we can choose when we want to have a lineup. And this has everything to do with the Caudacious staff in the sense is that what we do as attractors is we stay on one pole or another. And this is what you see as the two serpents, the black serpent, white serpent. Both of them think they're right. But actually one is left and the other one's right. The ones that control the reality are more of rightists, which makes them white. And that white, of course, is their light. That light makes them the white snake. That white snake is seraphim. And that then makes a person think that the holiest of holies is more graduated than an individual that is the darkest of the abyss, when in actuality they're both polarized and cannot generate energy on their own. And that's why they always try to attract what is opposite to them. Their whole goal is they don't care what side they have to be on, so they just need to know what side you're going to be on so they can attract you. The reality, though, is that in the center, there's center and the straight and narrow is the way. As they always say, you go up in through the solar pipeline. That's what the orb is on top, which still corresponds to your head. But it is your spine and being able to travel straight up through your spine rather than zigzag zig, which is the chakra world. Because if you notice that, I don't know these new diagrams that come out as a part of the heresy, but the chakras are not straight lined up in the spine. They have their conjunction points in the spine, but they're actually where the organs are, because the organs are always pumping and always secreting and always doing all sorts of stuff that creates energy. So if a person gets into an organ or gets into a chakra world, which is basically a disc or a wheel, and then they're not able to get out or travel through their complete corpus, which happens when you become imprisoned with boundaries and need passports to get from one direction or another, then one can even imagine that the chakra that they're in, or the disc that they're on, is the only one that exists. Now, this kind of knowledge is tetragrammic, because what you're dealing with DVD, which is the abbreviation for the name of David in the Hebrew text. And then when you take the D and you just make it a triangle, take the other D and make it a triangle, you interlace those triangles. And then so you get an idea of what the disc looks like, meaning that this code is one that we've seen throughout the galaxy before. We've seen many Sri Yantra type fields built on it, but it's funny to comment on it when you're actually inside of one. What is it? Basically a womb in itself. It is, as seedmen, and this happens with all species of this particular galaxy, you are still a compact, tightened down seed of what you originally are or came from. And then you have to, of course, grow up at a certain point, hopefully, but there's parables about these seeds, which are very similar to when turtles try to get from their nesting area back into the water. And about how many different things that you're faced in that attempts to take you off of this path of total realization of self. So to bring this thing back into perspective here, I wanted to start talking about, obviously, unless there's someone that wants to chime in, the body as a universe. Because there's the orifices, which renders a great deal of etymological wonders. But there's the orifices, or the main orifices of the body, which when you see yourself as being boarded, that's the only way that something can start to affect your consciousness. You find that there are certain places that they have to board. So I started thinking about this, even on a universal level. I kind of skipped out of my own mind for a moment and think of what that was going to mean for me, and started seeing, man, there are points on the planet, on the universe, in ad infinitum, how you can continue to lay out these large bodies that are configured still the same, that are entry and exit points. And there is a technique of trajection. This is where some level of order that you place on yourself comes back in your life. Like I heard about you on the urine cleanse and things. And this is the level of order that I'm talking about. It's when you actually go into the corpus and the body itself and begin to become the ruler over your system, the master over yourself. Now, obviously, these terms externally have a great deal of troubles, but internally they're great. And this is what I understood was the trick of the language, and why God backwards is dog, because it used to burn my brain up. And I used to wonder, I understood the where you could, if you could take the same words and you can create the same word, it has something to do with it, the other word. But some of these things were a stretch that I was looking at. And then so something, which was probably my oversoul, taps on my shoulder and says, look, one, when you read it one way, is internal. The other one, when you read it the other way, is the external one. So you just need to determine which one it is from there. Because indeed, God on your realm is a dog, but internally it is set itself up as a God. So that's the difference between the spiritual standpoint versus the physical standpoint, transmission out. So this would at times really, really expand me to seeing that I could, in a sense, since I was loaded with the program, start to manipulate it to work in my favor, where I wasn't sitting with 26 letters in the other half of the 26, which equals 52, which is one anu, one cycle, lost in Desmodema script, meaning that the English language, we got half of it. That's why it's shaped like a D when you understand what it is. It moves like a block, and that's why the D words seem to be dangerous and diabolical. But what happens is that this moving around the mind is so sluggish for a being that is generally moving right above the speed of light. And the reason why I say it like that is because you have to understand there's an apex point in the hourglass. There is a trap or a vortex between every single level of contact. There is either a suck, or there is a dispersion, or excuse me, I'm looking for the right words, but basically it's either pulling in or pushing out every time we make contact with something. And so now I wanted to go a little bit deeper in regards to, and as we said, we were going to stay on one topic today, but
oh no, I'm just letting you go. I just want to do one point. I'm listening to, wow, I could come in with so many things. The one that triggered with me is when you said about the passport, and I immediately went with I go fractal allegorical on it.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the Earth, you were talking about the different, if people get in this linear thinking of chakras, instead of seeing the body as I see it as a zodiac, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it disperses properly. If you are stuck in the chakra, the linear, you're effectively, I would equate that to someone that is completely embedded in the system, using all system ID, everything else, right? And the only way that they can go anywhere is with a passport. So with me, it's about taking all those boundaries away.
Right.
And that, if you look at the way they've compartmentalized Earth, you can't go anywhere on this body without one of their linear passports.
Exactly.
So for me, I translate that to the body and saying, well, I can go anywhere in my body. I'm not going linear anymore, and I see each organ as its own PowerPoint. There was a reason why the Egyptians took all these organs and put them in jars.
Right. Or some
It
people
wasn't
or some
just because
people lock them down. That's they talk about sometimes
exactly.
locking down the chakra if it becomes so damaged that it can't be repaired. Because it's like one thing if we're talking about a car, which is still somewhat on the same design, but hey, once you get a bad alternator, you can always go to the hardware store and get another alternator. But when you got a bad hippocampus or a pituitary gland, then who do you go to? And so I believe,
Yeah,
though, honestly, that's where we show up, Kate, because
exactly.
we're like the galactic tow truck in a certain sense. And if you have the membership of truth, then we can get you to your next destination and taken care of, because there's still a lot of knowledge written about this. I just haven't had a chance to really, personally, I've had a chance to scan over most of it. And there's a stasis to Earth, which is basically a freeze. It's known as the klipot. This is, of course, is the drawback of any plane. And as seeds, though, I can make this very simple. As seeds, we are planted in Earth. It's a planet. Look, seed, Earth, plant. So what happens is that it would make sense, though, if you understand how to really plant seeds. You generally need to put them down as deep as possible. And then all of what they go through to actually get out becomes their roots. And then that makes them be able to stand so firm and so strong like a fixed star. Not an asteroid, not one of these basically celestial bodies that can't be counted on. Because the astrolabe and things like Ori's gave us the designs of how to navigate our own systems. Obviously, you've talked heavily about this, but navigating, John Lash has obviously talked a lot about it. But being able to navigate your system and to guide yourself through what you're going to experience, and know when you're about to fly through a meteor field, or know when you need to tighten down certain areas of your aura with two magnets, one on one side, one on another, because you're going to be exposed in that area. So you can imagine then where we have to go. And a lot of people say, you can imagine what we were doing and where we were. Now I'm just explaining to people, this is where we're headed. We have a date with this, and it's not going to be something that we can avoid. Generally, what would occur is once people already understood that they had a date with it, it would still cause a certain level of insanity. Meaning that if you understand that you don't die, it becomes sometimes harder to deal with than that you do die. So then you'll understand kind of the purpose of this dimension. This is indeed a demented mind, but still realize some people have installed the death program, because when they feel like that they can't undo what they've done, like babies, they want a clean sheet. And this is, again, what I was talking about with the galactic brokering, because how much energy that you gain, and this is already seen in many of the traditions, but how far your magnetic field projects beyond your body determines how much you can really control your spirit body. And obviously the major signs of this is lucid sleep. Because once you're in lucid sleep and your aura is spinning fast enough, you can't actually stay below theta anyway. So you come into realization that you're dreaming, and then you start to deal more with that field and all of its vast vistas. Like, we haven't even walked around the Earth completely, so what makes us think that we've seen the entire astral plane? Even though you got some people that are saying that that's occurred. But the key here also is that we start getting into almost immediately in our being, what is going to propel us beyond this? Because this is, in many tenses, it's a mirror. It's actually a reflection of a time, in every tense, a reflection of a time for a being that does not operate on time. And I'll explain this a little bit deeper. When you leave the earth, if you have an excessive yearning because of sorrow to return to it, maybe there's somebody that you left, maybe there's something that you didn't finish, you have to be able to revisit that part on the timeline. So what the spirit being does in its many complexities is it sends back a seed. This is like a being that generally only moves forward, having to send something backwards. And this is how we kind of divide ourselves. We send a small part of ourselves to go access that entire experience and that entire memory so that we can stay connected to it. So I'll explain it again. What the oversoul is doing is got to head in one direction. It's a prime mover, meaning it's spinning the entire galaxy. This is us. But when we want to make sure that we remember one of our experiences, we must send a tentacle to it. The tentacle in itself is an exact copy of us. It's a seed. So then you could start seeing yourself as being dispersed almost from the mothership, which is your oversoul, but it's a mappa, meaning that it's actually androgynous. It's I forgot what the other name that they were saying, make. But basically, it's a being that has the ability to generate, but you have to have both poles. So we know it's gender. It's non-gendered. And in every tense, it's not polarized, or it could not generate energy. And so these are the basic fundamental building blocks, though, of what we were doing before. And that's why there has to be some level of quickening. When you get into explaining these kind of conversations with everyone, it doesn't mean that it's going to click, but we want it to. So how can we get it to do that? And this is one thing that I wanted to start revealing about English. English and how it was set up by those who wrote it, because obviously Shakespeare and a great deal of those individuals, when they came in with the new origins of English, were rushing it to the doors, and it was incomplete, so it was left as open source. So it's basically a half of a disc with the other half not complete either. So this has the effect of what's called a maybe, which you'll notice doesn't exist in other languages. There's no, in the old ancient languages, there's no maybe. It's either you are or you aren't. But this has seemed to work in our favor, because in times in which we were going to suffer sheer destruction by just the laws of reaction and action, we have been able to, with our egos, propel ourselves into a space that the universe doesn't even have any control. Some people say, well, what are you talking about? Well, according to the definition of the universe by any namaste person, that the universe would never allow this kind of thing to happen. But it's happening. So are we going to throw ourselves in insanity believing that the universe wants this to go on? Or are we going to go into another level and realize that maybe we don't understand completely what's happening in this hive? Why is it a hive? It's a hive for us that all carry a human body. Because in other hives, like bees and goats and crocodiles, they are all bees, goats, and crocodiles. So you don't see a bee going to try to hump a goat. Okay? And this is for a reason. These are the divisions in the octaves of the frequencies. But everyone in the human body is all in the hive together. So this is also why, as like when you mentioned earlier, the Bible, but obviously not for spiritual reasons, but or to encourage my spirituality, or actually in my tense it can, because I know what it's really talking about. But those kind of books become important to understand because you have billions, I think, if not hundreds of millions of people shooting from their frontal lobe these kind of anchors of what is going on in this current reality. And I'll explain that a little bit deeper. When a person wakes up every morning and acknowledges something, because we are spiraling through space, if they acknowledge any kind of word, shape, or form or symbol, they basically rewind themselves back to that point. They anchor themselves to that point. So this rolls into mantra. This is why mantra is really one of those things that it's really for grown-ups only, we'll say. Because mantras are vibrations that connect across the universe with other beings that are making that same sound or signal, whatever it may be, or wherever it may be, is more the proper way to say it. And the reason is because the further you get into the expanse, the more developed you become. So there are very developed consciousness out there. If we choose to jump into a vehicle that is fast enough to travel where out there is and not run out of gas, which is basically going insane, in a field that you're lost in and you can't get back, then you're able to actually bring a great deal of cures and information to this entire reality that we're dealing in now. Because what you've done is you've gone into the future. And I'll say this again. If you can jump into a vehicle within yourself that is able to propel itself into these higher fields or more complex fields, and then have the ability to make it back. Notice I always bring that up because there's hospitals full of thousands of people who have not come back from their spiritual journey. So this is then the key to what our navigation is really about. This is why once you regroup yourself, you become that adventurer that is going to find things that are going to engender this species that we are all here together, the good ones and the bad ones alike, even though they're all blurred to me now, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 head, or a head, actually 2 heads. Yeah, that's more like it. One is invisible. Just like they're showing on Jack and the Beanstalk when they went and got the giant, the leader of them had 2 heads. And this is to show that we have this duplicity with us that has so far propelled us. It's almost like it's an energy system within itself, this duality. But it's worn us down over time. Like if you stand out in the sun for a long period of time every single day, you start seeing your skin and things wear down, especially if you have a lot of toxins. You have to end up becoming harmonic with the resonance of the sun in order for it to actually begin to replenish you and to heal you. This is about harmonic resonances. Things that want to actually do something for you can't because they cannot resonate with you. I'll explain this very simple. With good bacteria, this is the ones that help you digest food. For a person that has a very toxic system, the moment they take those good bacteria, their system immediately attacks it, meaning that all of the bad bacteria jump on and beat up the good bacteria and kill them. So people need to start realizing that the system that you've created inside of yourself because of the MK Ultra, because of the programming, has caused the system to be somewhat aggressive against anything that is coming to assist it. And this is what makes the job of individuals that are giving the enlightenment very difficult, because those who are bringing the truth are often perceived as the ones bringing the falsehood, while the ones bringing the falsehood are perceived as the one being in the truth. This happens because of attraction, meaning that a lot of people, I can tell you personally, that are seeking the truth are seeking it more to hear that the reptilian or the comet or the light worker, the ascended master, anything external that they can eat, basically, is the truth versus it's them. Now, this is a problem for the sovereign, because you can never become a sovereign unless you're ready to take the full responsibility for yourself. So what happens is if it's anybody else, they've taken the power. And that is how quick it is. It moves quick. That's why in the ancient languages it says, "Udabillahi minash shaitan rajim," meaning protect me from the whispers of this being. What is a whisper then in this language? When you go look it deeper into the whispers, it means that's actually something that no one can hear. That's what a whisper is supposed to be. It's supposed to be something that others can't hear except for the person that you're telling. This means that the thought is in your mind. So then when you go into the mind or back into the temple, you see Cain on one side, Abel on the other. That's what's going on in the temple. Those are the gods who have set themselves up. When you get into that part of your mind and you ask yourself, how many thoughts do I have going on in my mind that are constantly conflicting each other? Then we'll actually see how we've learned to power ourselves in this dimension. Meaning we've been taught to power ourselves on the conflicts of both of our minds going against each other. In one moment you want to do one thing, you get almost close to getting that done, then you turn back around and start doing another. One day you meet some person, this supposed to be the person you're supposed to be with, you can never separate. A couple weeks later, you're back in the other direction. Where does this come from? And so this is where we start looking again, like I said, into the cell to start saying, okay, I see what's up. This has happened before. I'm actually, instead of in the throne seat, which is actually in the seat of the brain and the hippocampus where, again, the androgen rules, instead of that area, we're in the tail or the coccyx of the spine, which is more attached to the past, or our tail, the old story. And the sediment, because as planets, you get sediment. The sediment that has built up inside of our system is basically the fears. It's what's frozen. Fears are always the things that we don't really want to approach, what we don't want to open up. It's like, if you really want to see where the fears of the human being is, go into the open ocean and see how a person reacts when asked if they want to go diving and go deep into this water. And then they start seeing things that are not phi based. Now, obviously, on land, we have a lot of things that we feel can live with us, like dogs and cats and different things of that nature. But when you go into the ocean, it's different geometry in there. So you find yourself confronted with the alien and how much fear you have inside of yourself because you haven't realized your connection with other beings because you're still in the hive. Now, this is the other thing about these symbols. The symbols are owned. These are the Mason marks. The pentagram itself is a way of not just squaring the circle, it's a way of squaring the egg. We're not circles either. We don't just go in circles and repeat and repeat and repeat. Nah, we're eggs. We have a logarithmic spiral generally. So we generate energy based on our shape. So what happens in our reality, though, is if someone attempts to convince us that you're a circle, you just go in circles, and then they take you from a circle to a square. This is like a sculptor then. And that's what you see with a mason. A mason is a builder. But more important, a free, which comes from the word fray, which means pharaoh, is a builder for Pharaoh. And so this gets back into more of an ancient story about that damn pyramid. Meaning there are things that if we bring them into our reality, they break the envelope. Basically, they take the planet's virginity. And this is what we have to see intrusive things as, even though we've become quite intrusive. We've been taught to use things such as language. Not only we are intrusive, we're actually also very rough at how we enter into the constellation, meaning entering into thoughts very roughly with rudimentary languages in your mind does not equal good communion. So what we have experienced here in our planet with the arrival of things like the pyramids, but more of the frequency and the geometry that's involved in it, is knowledge that was much further graduated than the entities that were actually living on the planet. So what you have happen is you have someone that wants to fast forward things. And now, before you go and point the finger at Lucifer, let us think, have we not come into some great deal of an idea and then decided if humanity was aware of this idea at once, it would further us along a lot faster? So these kind of concepts, which are untested, it's interesting that we've started testing on ourselves. Like when you take the language or you start to do things with beakers and you start to ingest plants, you're now the test subject. Okay, so we started testing on ourselves these realities, these matrices, these experiences, these frequencies, because we're adventurers. But the reality was also is we had a map. See, the thing about the map is that it's the real, hey, if I mess up, I need to get back to the point of origin. If I add too much to the being, I need to be able to get back to the point of origin. I need that as a schematic. And this is why we feel lost, because we don't know the body. Because the good news is that we were smart enough to say, okay, well, I need to hard code the map. Because if I'm ever going through a vortex, obviously everything that's not buckled down and got secure rigging is going to fly off. This means when you are going through the fall phase and then all of your gloriousness is getting stripped from you, whatever you haven't buckled down and put inside of you will not be there when you come into a world. So notice when we've come into this world, we've come almost devoid of any real senses. This is like square one. So I started, again, looking in this to just pull back from the entire conversation. I started looking at this and I said, well, geez, what we're going to need to do then is we're going to identify this map, because I get this whole, I want Kundalini and I want to ride off in the spaceship and I want to visit other galaxies, but damn if you take off without a map. It doesn't even make sense in this reality. So what makes us think it makes sense in the astral plane in a certain tense? If you understand the higher vibratory frequencies of responsibility to understand where you're projecting your course, you can run right into something. So this is one of the major things that we see the body as, and why the symbol became the pentagram later on. Because once the body was put inside of the pen became then the double code word, meaning that if you know what the pen is and you can get out, then it's not a cage for you, it's a shield. It's a shell corp. What does a shell corp do? It hides the identity of the substance within. This means that you're actually inside of a body and that's not even you. I know it's not you. When anyone with a functioning third eye, when looking at you, already knows that you look entirely different than what you look like in this reality.
So just wait for him to pick up. There he is. Yeah, I have to bring you in through this way, Sevan, because I can't. Once I'm locked in with Blog Talk, I'm locked in. So,
That's fine.
yeah. So carry on, my friend. I was just telling everybody, I'm just sitting back and I'm watching all these beautiful pictures roll into my head in allegory, fractal from what you're saying, and seeing how every piece that I've got is just right in the same line, and it's beautiful.
Nice. So I mean, where I left off was I was saying so the identity of the person is being shaped by the Sri Yantra fields. And what I'm saying is that as you're making your entry into these different envelopes and fields into your incarnated here in this consciousness, you've gone through a great deal of shaping. And that's why if you see this planet, one of the planets next door, Venus, is tracing out this particular shape in the sky. And because we're able to connect that particular shape with the actual form, of course, this is the pentagram with curved edges, with the form of many of the life forms here, it actually flags Venus as a womb. This is just, if you would go and gander just a little bit, you could just find proof of that alone. But if you go a little bit further, then you'll have to assume that Mars is one. You'll have to assume that many of the planets that are around us are wombs. And there is life existing there based on that octave, but as you say, as above, so below, they have a correspondence here. And also we have several correspondences, but what we don't have a great deal of anymore is amplification. This is a big thing because in all of this massive memory, you need basically a circuit. You need something that sends this light through all of the tunnels, basically checking. Like, okay, you still remember? Yeah. Oh, kids on Nebulon 5. Oh, yeah, still remember? Great life. Oh, still, as a full-fledged flying being on Dimension, you still remember? Yes. But let me tell you something. Some people may think this is far-fetched. Like, how you did that? Look, you did everything. All is self. These are all tunnels. Because if you go into the deep books that cost like 40 or 50,000 that most can't stand in because they're like vortexes themselves because of the amount of darkness and ignorance of what they've done with the high knowledge. But the reality is that you realize that there is such an intrinsic level of the energy experience that we're going on, that we have going on here. There is a communion, in a sense, on every single level of life. And that's what I was saying, that there is a dance, the same dance that you see going on in nature, that we are constantly doing with quirks, in a sense, meaning that something so infinitesimally small, you can't see it, but don't believe it's not true. It's not there. It doesn't exist. Our ideas have so much power associated to them, especially if we believe them. And this is where it taps. This is where the wave starts, though, because in every bit of riding Kundalini is like riding a wave, because if you tap into the immortality of the spirit, because spirit's immortal, it doesn't believe that it can die because it can. You can't force it to believe that. So when you become more of a spiritual being, you actually inherit this indestructible nature. And what that has a tendency to do, though, when one doesn't remember they're in a physical body, is be very, very aggressive to the physical body. It's almost like a baby because of how fast it can be damaged. It becomes to the level where if a person does not see that you're here to strengthen all of these vehicles until you release that sheath, and how you leave that sheath, like the chrysalis, is going to determine the shape and the mode of which all of what your experience is made you into. So make it beautiful. Do not let any shape, form, or fashion take over your consciousness, and then you end up becoming something that is so ordinary, in a sense, meaning you come out as a hexagon or a hexagram. What is a hexagram? Hexagram is a 6. 6 is sex. Sex is on fire. Why? Because it needs heat. Who is it? It's Ma. Is she material? Of course, she's a material girl. Why? Because she needs to keep all of this stuff to make sure she can feed all the rest of the seeds. So what do we do at times? Fault her for her promiscuity. of not just being with humans, but also many other life forms that we're still yet to understand. Basically, even the ones we put in our mouths. The ultimate level of disrespect of something is to consume it, to basically put it, to take it out of its space and to put it inside of your space without becoming symbiotic. What is a symbiotic person? It carries a life form. It does not kill a life form. Notice that in our bodies then, when we put air, and that air comes from, let's say we're in the Swiss Alps, and all these positive vibrations and ions in the air, and you, old cancer bag, takes a breath. And then all of that air, instead of imploding and then living its next life as your massive experience of awakening and aha moment, it sinks into the carbon of the 666 until it resides in the bone of old Saturnalian. Meaning that the symbol of the Saturnalian is the bones and the skeleton, because that is what endures through time. Slow-moving planets. The bone becomes so dense it's like stone. Then we start calling it crystals after a while, carrying the skulls all around, acting like they're going to do something. None of this stuff can do anything without a power supply. Now, here's the thing: humans are, in a tense. You see how electricity doesn't empower us, really. There's certain things we can send electricity through and convert into something that may give us a slight little jolt, like homeopathy. But realistically, that's not our choice of fuel. Now, this is also what's happening with human beings, because we are used to getting this foreign secretion, which is a secret, is the essence from certain individuals, and that actually lubricates and rejuvenates our systems. We do it only with each other, basically. I mean, that's kind of obvious. So when you go into those kind of fields, though, and then now you see that the actual excretion that is coming from each organism is emitting only this vapor of toxin, then you start realizing more closely how we're the ones that are poisoning each other with the gases and the ideas that are coming from each other. But then you can keep going and say, well, okay, problem. What was the solution then? What happened when we collected too much negative energy into a reality that was etheric? We use what is basically organic orgone. Organic orgone are positive human beings, people who can basically see through all of the darkness and the ignorance and the foolishness and the bombs and the missiles and the babies getting ripped apart and all this kind of stuff, and still see a full spectrum light. It knows how to guide the way. It's like, okay, look, I understand that this is rough. And like last night the night before, about 3 nights ago, I heard some stuff, and it just, oh my goodness. Sometimes I just get these surges of energy, and I'm a little concerned, because it always seems to happen when I see something getting abused that doesn't deserve it. And what I saw occur, not to mention I believe that nothing deserves it. That is my personal state of mind. Some people don't believe that way. But the reality is that I heard an interview where spirituality was played with so much, high levels of spirituality, that the genuine people that were on the line looking for it were not getting it. They were asking the questions that people like only me and you and the ones that are expanded can answer, and then getting their answers thrown back at them in their questions back at them in a technique that makes it seem like it's the answer to their question, but it doesn't answer anything. And I said, what is this, the Nigerian scam of the spiritual world now? We're going to do this now? We're going to close all the portals for even the individuals that want to receive full spectrum light? Not on my watch. And that's when I realized it. That what goes on in these kind of planets, you need to make sure you keep your conscience clear. Meaning, no matter what everyone else is doing, make sure you do what you're supposed to do. Because if you don't, it sticks with you. Literally, it bothers you. It's like that twinge of what needs to be undone. And then you figure out, especially when you get in the layer cake way up there, that you have to revisit that spectrum, and now it's intensified itself off of your energy when you could have dealt with it earlier. Meaning that there's a massive dynamic about how we're approaching everything in this world. But until we know what we're doing, it's best to walk on tippy toes somewhat. Meaning when treading on yourself, this is a planet, this is you, do not just cut if you don't know if that's an artery, or maybe you're about to cause an abortion or something of this nature. And I'm saying this on multiple levels, meaning all of our expansiveness and all of our different roads to different vistas that equal truth, let us not shut down truth by just saying at times, that's really not what I believe it to be. Meaning we have to get some kind of system that allows us to determine, and this is what I love about language and what I really discovered within it, that also let us pull the truth from somewhere else. So it played somewhat of the mediator between two minds when they were both confused. Each of them had taken the truth. God's a dog. Yeah, he's the Canaanite. Canine, his Anubis. They're the Anunnaki. And then, it goes into that dark state of the mind. You see Anubis there doing the rituals. You see him giving the rites of passage back into the world. You see the canine gate, right? That's the dark one. Then the light one comes in and comes with this on stage. What are you talking about? That's Cain. He's the king. He's the Khan. He's the coin. He's the two-face. But he's the ruler of the dimension. And it's not a he. It's a rebus. Meaning that, like I said, the Queen of England, do you think that's a woman in every tense? You have to understand, what are the signs telling you? Go to the energy sources. What are they engaging in? Reverse engineer the language. Like we talked about the Hebrew, when you drop it all down on itself, it makes a Star of David, right? So what is it? This language is a fire language. Then you figure out, Sanskrit is one too. But what's in the fire? Looks like fire is father. Some people have gotten the sun confused for the father. But the sun, meaning the sun in the sky, is embodying fire, but fire is not it. It has learned how to use fire and not burn. But father is a fire that is a consuming and a raging fire. It lights as a beacon to multiple galaxies. This is a primordial state. There's no thinking. That's what makes it not have a conscious about what it does when it's time to burn something up. When you say, I need to get rid of this, what principle do you think comes in and gets rid of it, especially if it's ugly and snarling and doesn't want to go away? Like, this is the other side of the other realm, the other side of the looking glass, Alice. This is where in Antarctica, it's all being controlled from the poles by those who wanted to master the mind. Mastermind, a Ubermensch, which became a Uber slave, meaning from a superman to a super slave. The next level of the program that was introduced, which was to put hybrids after colonization, which you see going on in America, which is her own corpus. She stands her own body. She has a center, which is a belt, Central America, and then a South America, just to get into, again, the forming of the entity, which we talked about in another conversation. These are corporations, meaning groups of things together, but you'll see Amazon stretched out across the earth. This is what the other hidden secret of why the woman remains veiled is because of her secret is Columbia. It's a column or a pillar. That's even still a name in Hispanic in Hispanic tradition, pilar, meaning that something that you stand or depend on that shines light. Why can it shine light? Because it sixes a fire, meaning that it gives off an attraction that even the most glorious and eloquent of us become attracted to it. And then we fly in it, and then we unpack. See, because that is the contract, the oath, the binding, and the ritual. It is the circumambulation of the spheres themselves. It's when you decide to give up certain things in order to benefit off of others, meaning that it's explained to you before you get here. And that's why they say when you're born, you forget it because you're born into sin. Who is sin? The sun. S-I-N-S-U-N. You're born under the sun. So the sun has a way of programming the entire reality until you can become resonant with it. Meaning, at least if you cannot give off energy, you can't stand in that arena of solar beings. So you cannot go then to the inner court, not external court, the inner court and plead your case. Hello, let me state what's going on. Automatically, that's why there's a secret to why there are ancient and accepted Masons and just Freemasons. And it's because, and then also Masons and other brotherhoods. And it's because the knowledge was universal. It's to understand the systems and the ways and the motions of the supreme being. But when you became like the accepted, they're under the king. That's the God that they trust. He's the Germanic god Gud, who has his son Eric, who's the heir of the throne. And it's been the same thing ever since, as Eris places itself on the top of the egg and decided to separate itself from the base of the pyramid. And that was it. Like after that disconnection from who we really are, which is our kingship in a sense, our lot, our inheritance, when that no longer became viable information that we can receive, then we forget our origin. Obviously, I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory, but if you forget your origins, that means you don't know what you can become. This is why also the past gets dark, and it's hard to carry a light through it, because there's a lot of things there that we don't want to accept, especially when it's about us, especially when it's this name that's still been running around because it's a part of the ritual. Meaning that, okay, the standard rituals generally go for a specific period of time, and what is written in that ritual is the child's. Because the child is still the biorhythmic connection of you, and in fact, you. So every time you reincarnate to anything that has a biorhythmic connection close to you, i.e. family, then through the name or the mark, the tone, the vibration, which is generally suggested to the parents, the next level of the contract and the fulfillment of the contract begins. I just say disavow. The interesting thing about the egos is so strong, you got to realize what we created. Ego can shut down concepts of saying that you have to stay here indefinitely, which other laws say. Other laws say that when you dig so deep into the mire and then you actually engage in certain practices like loading the language, then it becomes impossible for you to take this reality with you. What does that mean? No mother, no father, no knowledge, no wisdom, no words, no shapes. Why? Because it cannot go to higher spaces, right? So let me tell you, I'm not talking about something that we need to make a decision about in the future. I'm talking about something that already happened. We had another solution. We decided to create the sequential, meaning to create this system of the Sri Yantra, the sex, that brings a 5, which is the pentagram, through its complete stage of coming out as another a being that can generate, meaning that we created a system. And now you see that system is running amok of doing the greatest thing that you can ever think of in the galaxy, and we don't even know it, and that's creating babies. Whoever wants to claim that they actually are the Lord of it, this is what becomes funny. Somebody says, well, where does the baby come from? Well, the baby comes from the semen because the seed is inside of the man, but surely that seed couldn't grow if it wasn't planted in any type of soil. So who's really on top? And so that's the first level of the mystery, that the being was divided at a certain point, but it shows in the reflection of our spirit, because we have a masculine and a feminine side, that we were created inside of the same body. So when we generate, which is called an inception, it's not a conception. Conception is when it comes into the external world. Inception is the internal world. When we bring that energy back within ourselves and have an inception, there's a birth on the inner planes. Now, this gets you then into higher levels of energy, because that's the only way I can explain after that. Because this is now, in a sense, you've learned to generate something so precious that as a current itself, it is highly desired in the galaxy. Meaning that this same system that you're seeing here, that is money, that is connected to current, has to do with a great deal of the essence that you can emit. The question is, can you emit joy, compassion, and these kind of things ad infinitively without burning your system out? So that's why there's always this open door for those who can actually begin to work on their system piece by piece, that see the direction of how our aura is spinning, that can see, again, English as open source programming, and begin to delete the viruses and the worms within the system. This simultaneously is deleting in your physical system all the worms and the bacteria that are locked up in the strata of your intestines. This means that you don't have to keep approaching this from the metaphysical level or the physical level or the mental level. You can figure out what is your strong point and start triangulating yourselves from that point so you can get out of the triangle. Like the 3 is the half of the 6, so the 3 is D. 3D. So what happens is that these kind of codes I found to be very malicious in brains that don't understand what they mean. But for a game master, It's like even everyone, like I always say, the reality that you depict yourself in after a while becomes completely malleable. If you can convince yourself that it's true, then it actually is that's in certain spaces because you're the movie maker then. So in certain of some of those realities, this was the highest level you could really take it without completely detaching from who you really were. To forget for a moment. And I realized that this is a great deal of remembering because what we wanted to do is we wanted to unpack here. This is not a hotel. This is a mansion. And so when we came into it, we left certain things outside. It's like it didn't get through customs. It wasn't the custom of the planet, right? But then we started sneaking it in, smuggling it in, unpacking it. It's like, yo, you got the space modulator? Yep, it's installed. What about the precious metal? Well, Zaxxon's gone to get that. I haven't seen him in 3,000 parsecs, but I'm sure he'll be around soon. I'll holler at him on Dreamtime and see if he can actually catch up. See if I can shoot him a little extra spin. You know I'm kind of low, though. See, what I'm talking about is in a whole different world that starts looking at the reality as completely malleable. We only have to create the right integers in order that bolt on to the same system, and then that will allow it to actually work in our favor. This is not something that they created. This is something that they're meddling with. So in every tense, when we see the organic grid, which is how what you see the spirits travel when they come out of the bodies, especially when a person dies, they travel down the path like what you would travel through a forest. There's a path cut there, and there's basically like fairy dust on the ground. It's glowing, and that be a ley line. But then there's an artificial grid, which is set up by the pyramid system in many of the cathedrals and structures around the world. And then those actually shine off as false beacons because the person, when committing and binding themselves to that in life, recognize it, especially if they recall it every single day when they say, the Lord is you. You see what I mean? It's like you have to turn it around, but we know what's going on. But we also seen the worlds of the immortal Charlemagne, meaning that there's still going to be a difference between those that are experiencing it versus those that are just reading it. These worlds are actually set up in Merkaba mysticism. It's basically harvesting more brighter minds, is what you would call sometimes a savant. A brighter mind that has a strength to build an entire world and may not, in their mind, and may not even be persuaded towards negativity at all, meaning that these beings at times, they're humans, they don't even know that they're doing this, but they become the storage base for these kind of thought forms that this reality has built up in its MK Ultra programming. Meaning that when you read, there's one book I got to remember, but it sets out the entire field of what the MK Ultra looks like in the mind, because that's how they developed it first. They built it like in a tense, nightmarish playland, but in a three-dimensional scale, and then compressed it back into a linguistic and a symbolic scale. Because anything that actually is matched, or as you see the Pythagoreans, they symbolize themselves with this pentagram, so you can understand who's involved in the secret brotherhoods, if you want to even call them brothers. But the reality is that you can see these connections that spell out something that is every bit of a spell. And again, fast forwarding, how do you break spells? You break them by severing the ties of whatever is connecting you to that. But there's a period, and this is what I need to really talk to everyone about. As even Dr. Kassar, a good friend of mine, brings it up. He says, you don't want to kill anything. You really don't want to get into that. What you want to do is you need to give it the options. Because as you're going through another vibratory frequency, they will disembark. Meaning that you need things to disembark from your consciousness, because when you carry them through certain fields, you're allowing them to have access. Let me tell you how I learned this. One time I'm in this massive zone, like third eye is wide open. And then all of a sudden, the realm gets tainted with these red triangles. And I couldn't orientate myself for a moment, and then I realized, as I tapped into the field and said, what is this? Because you could always get the data back if you know how to query. It said, man, these are the pyramid boys, right? And I said, sending the information fast, because it's like almost like galactic hacking in a sense, because they don't understand at times how adept you may be and how many scenarios you've been through. So if you're an extractor, you can get data, but it's basically individuals who have grouped themselves into these darker cults under the pyramid brotherhoods, traveling around areas that they don't, traveling to areas that they generally don't have access to through other individuals' consciousness. And again, how I was made aware of this is that once that experience went through, and then I went into this more of a calm field, when I was just about to breathe out, something said, hold on. Don't breathe that out into this reality. Neutralize it first. And you knew that then, because what was going to happen is you were going to be used as the portal for it to travel into a reality that it normally cannot exist in. This is like this spaces within spaces, I'm calling it now. It's the level of galactic real estate that is being meshed out within people's consciousness, where the mind becomes the real estate.
Yeah, a smuggling mule, basically.
Exactly, a smuggling mule of consciousness. But every bit of, what do they call the one that they send in and they don't care if it dies or not? You know, the coyote run or whatever they call it. But it's basically where they put the dirtiness on the other person's back, and then they don't care if they get eliminated as long as they send enough people through, right? And so, and some of them get through. But these are the projects. Like I sum these things up as such as Project Capricorn, which is the control of the spiritual dimension. And this, of course, came about because as limitless, you believe that you can do anything until someone says that you can't. And then if you happen to believe that you can't, like, what goes on with a baby from the time that they're born to the time that they start accepting this I can't, then, you've gotten somewhat limited. Or not somewhat, but definitely limited. So, to bring it back in circle, let me just get some water here. But just to start from the beginning of this conversation, what's up? I mean, I can see that as like the entry point to what we have to cover today, because I think that was about an hour and a half.
No, this is great. I like I said, I just wanted to let you go. Just give me a match. I'm gonna light this firecracker and just see what happens. I want to just touch on a point you made there. I think it's critical. It goes back to the I can't, right? And
right.
Yeah, we get indoctrinated heavily with that. And I go back to a lecture that this is, I think, from the 80s, Robert Morningsky, and he was describing his growing up as a child, and he was raised both Hopi and Apache, and Hopi being matriarchal, Apache being patriarchal, right? And he said he'd be 1 week with one set of grandparents, the next the other with the other set, because his parents I think his mom passed away or his dad died and his mom left, whatever, it doesn't matter. But what he said was, when he was the week with the Apache, a couple of things that they did. He said he was 6 years old at the time. They were required to take a mouthful of water, and they would run 10 miles, 5 miles out and 5 miles back, and they had to spit all that water, the same water, back into a cup. And if they didn't, then they had to go and do it again, right?
Right.
The most poignant one, and he said everyone did it because because they were never told they couldn't. And there was another one where an Apache warrior would take a bow and arrow and shoot it at the child, and the child would catch it in the air. And he said, yeah, we would do that all the time. And it's because we were never taught that we couldn't. It was just an accepted norm that you could.
Right. And
that's the difference with our society. If you look at the education system overall, and I talk about this quite regularly, you if you don't get all the answers right according to how the system wants you to think, they put big X's on your page, big red X's. So that really deeply instills the I can't. And then I talked about musical chairs this morning, right?
Right.
One kid could, 29 couldn't. So that's really you mentioned it as the Capricorn project.
Yeah, that's definitely the Capricorn project, because if you notice, Jesus is a Capricorn. And so what you're really dealing with is you're dealing with the authoritative system on the spiritual plane, but still operating in disguise in a sense where it just snatches the identity of who is the supreme being.
Right.
And that's enough, because that's actually the supreme thing. So it's stolen basically the most valuable thing in that tense. And this occurring when you have realities that, if you have seeds growing, and this is what happens where we witness this in our reality about children, and there's like a nursery, and then let's say all the babies are asleep, and you go in there and let someone playing a full orchestra band. I mean, to see the ensuing chaos. So what happens is that we also have this reality to where there's this government, because we're in an envelope. And what happens is that how much energy that we generate can either make the difference between this reality going critical in a certain tense, which was one direction, and then somewhat like an implosion, which would be the other direction. And what is really deemed as beneficial for this planet is it just stays slowed down. So it's not in stasis, where if you stop, you freeze, by the way. But it's actually going still, where it's a certain warmth, but nothing like if you're standing on Wriggle. You know what I mean? And
I hear
that's
you.
what you would see as the degrees of heat where your consciousness would still remain. So what we're talking about is that it ceases to become heat. And this was another thing that was a secret about the Sphinx. When entering this receptacle to gather this knowledge, the lion, which is a lioness actually, in front of the Sphinx, will sniff if you have a soul that has fear. And generally, a soul that has fear actually has like what we would see as flesh on it, like when you can see flesh on a person's mouth. And this attracts what we would see as the father of hounds. But basically, it goes back through the genus where dogs are not even there, because obviously dogs are domesticated wolves, back through the genus where the wolf is not even there, back into the ones with the circular eyes, which is how you denote the species of animals, because obviously the goats have different kind of eyes. But then you see that the lion has a circular eye because it has been the portal of one of the first groups of beings that started to populate this planet and take it through its process of gardening, which is really more the term that it was called. I mean, and you're talking about a level of potency within these beings that any level of secretion, whether it be spit, whether it be the golden seed, which was basically the seed of life, whatever it was, then if it dropped anywhere on this planet, it would just bud up. Kind of like what you were seeing in the movie The Fountain, where, you know, the ring dropped on the ground, and then all of a sudden all the fertilization. But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about generators, because if you notice that's what I always tell people. I said it the last show, I can't say enough of it. If you see beauty in the reality still, then you know you have a powerful ally, because beauty, you want to take that anywhere with you and watch how it disarms everything. That's why we know that this is not some horrible phantom dream hologram, which, you know, a lot of these MK Ultra minds are trying to steer us into at times, and not me, but just the overall consciousness.
Yeah, the fear porners.
Exactly. Fear Partners Incorporated now. And like one just came across in the grid just recently from the Gaia Cobra. Like, we're just going to have to deal with that personally on the spiritual plane. But the reality is that you have these people, and they're going with the doomsday again. Oh, this has to happen. You need to patronize this store and get your supplies right away, or else you may be caught without. And I'm like, okay, this is getting a little annoying. Call the spiritual police. And
Yeah.
see, there's another level to this. That's what I always said. I'm getting excited now. I think I'm about to rev up here. But there's another level to this, because notice how when you approach a sheriff or you approach a police officer, they're always wearing a shield. And
Yep.
that is either 7.5 point or that actual other geometry, which is seldom understood, but it's just made out of curves, which makes up the shield. So this means that there's definitely some level of, just as when it's shown to an individual that has a spirit inside of them that is aggressive, it can disarm them. Meaning that the shield itself, when the police officer comes in and there's a situation that's going crazy, and that situation on the spiritual plane is that the person's basically got a little bit too much astral juice to drink. And now they're flooded with occupants, meaning that your body is a corpse. It's also like a hotel. You can evict people. You can have a good bacteria hanging out. You can have a great galactic party inside, as long as everyone's playing well, whatever. This means all the states of consciousness that you've tapped into and have been fully explored by you, right? So what happens, though, when a person is not in control of understanding that all of these, of what they're hearing and seeing, is still them? meaning that the ultimate level of being able to withstand any kind of supremeness is to understand all is self, so that if you somehow start to mistake what you're looking at or what you're seeing for not being you, you don't start spiraling into the massive fear factor, because that's what happens. So in every tense, I started to look into deeper why we contract. Like, why are we so close to this knowledge? Because if you tell someone they're a supreme being, they might want to kill you. It depends on who you're talking about.
I tell them that every night, so it's
right?
So it's all good.
So it gets us to, well, what's really happening? It can once again be identified as fear, and fear is biolocal. But to be very explicit about fear contracts. When someone scares you, you draw back. So the faculty that is generally used to allow you to see what you're basically now scared to see is closed. That's all that's happening. It's nowhere near as complex as anyone else would try to make it. And that's why releasing the fears, conquering the fears in some way or another, actually opens up third eye facilities so you can see things as they really are. And this becomes like that interesting phenomena of genuflection with yourself, where you're actually going inside and beginning to power up yourself based on the real principles of what's going on. And so I've watched this whole access of climbing the spine, which is what we used to call it, meaning that we get up, we're in Malkuth, surely Satan's running around, that's still sat, it's hot. And most people are asleep because the heat is exhausting, so they're below theta. And now you're looking around you, and then you see the two poles. You see the heat, and then you see Isis, or the ice queen. And then you're in between both of them being the steam for a while. And that's why I was saying it's just a reactor. It's not an actor. You're just basically waiting on somebody to do something or some check to come or whatever, so you can go and do your next thing. And that is Malkuth, or really pronounced Moth, because that is the actual name of the feminine deity that is running this vacuum. And feminine in a sense of not that it's a female, because it actually contains both poles. A female as in a human female, because there's also a female lion. But a female in a sense that it actually has a womb that generates. So when we come from Moth and we start making our ascent, generally it's a zigzag. That's really what the SS is. It's the zigzag. It's the mind control that instead of letting you go up the straight great glass elevator, Charlie, it's like ping pong now with you and the rest of the dimensions, and then hidden dimensions, like they call it the death. That's death, meaning that what is death? The definition, what does it really mean? It's a caused phenomena. That's what it's summed up to being. That's why most of the time it cannot be defined. It seems to pass right through a beaker. It's vaporous. And the reason why it's explained as such is because it does not have much substance. It's not really real. And then we even have gotten to a level where we can start powering realities off of things that have not necessarily even taken place. Think about when you get an idea in your mind and you're so enthusiastic about it, but it hasn't happened yet. What are you doing? Biolocal. You go into the future and then start drinking from the attractive energy that you already created. So you're basically feeding then yourself. That is a sovereign. The sovereign actually backs their way out. Like it's almost like you're holding your gun, and then all of these other life forms that are trying to come in on you, and you're just like, you see the door behind you, and you step through animal portal, meaning you let the animals go in their karmic. We promised them something that we need to deliver, which is that we would instruct them on how to complete the entire path. We cannot do that by eating them. Then the next thing is you go into the water, meaning that now you have to see that it's 70% of you, the water that you're drinking, needs to be shaped and molded and fashioned in some way, even if it's just your mind. And then you back into mineral kingdom. Hello, these guys are noble, meaning that the mineral kingdom is not really going to play around with you. If you're already in there, that means you need it to be. This has everything to do with superconductivity and high spin. And then once you get that high spin, it's only the breath, which many people have seen in some altered states of consciousness. Even taking a short breath seems to implode your consciousness into another reality. You almost don't want to breathe, so you don't. And then that is the state out of the pin. And that's how, like I said, they say one ring will rule them all, one ring shall bind them, right?
Yep.
and in the darkness of their ignorance, whatever. But they're talking about the pentagram. It's that if you don't understand how to control the body is in a sense leased out. It's this particular shape has been traveled. We're not the first men and women. Like actually, the constellation of what it shows with this particular symbol seems to stem back between the cones of Orion, meaning that this seems to be a tetric template, a tetric tantric template that was taken from another galaxy where they seem to have it figured out and just created worlds that basically float away from gravity and then brought low as if it was bought from some other being to beings that it created out of its own ignorance. And then, and we grow up from there. And then meanwhile, this being like also a plan of the individuals who already saw across time that such things would be done. Meaning that there is nothing going on here that is a surprise to when you're in control. I'm not saying to those who are in control. I'm saying when you are in control, nothing is a surprise. When something happens that is a surprise, it means that you have relinquished control. Who did you relinquish control from? Yourself, nobody else. If you make it somebody else, then you haven't realized that all is self. That puts you right on them. Biolocally, you can access them, meaning any state of consciousness that may be harboring itself within your state of consciousness that is not of you and symbiotic of you can then be removed. This is a sequence of ways that you move through your mind, and this is basically like cleaning house. You always got to do it, because if you notice, what does the captain always face? Stowaways. You look in the back of the ship and you're like, hey, where'd you guys come from? You're not even working. It becomes when you go into the body and you see some of these dormant glands and you're like, what happened to the pineal gland? Oh, they went home. Home where? Get here and raise the Jed, meaning this is setting up command over the body. You go back in the body because this is the only way a lot of people are going to actually have the incentive that they need to stop or start doing certain things to actually get their system online. And obviously we've covered that in many different shows. It is a formula. Like when you go into your body and say, well, raise the jet, like this is not, start up the engines. And they're like, well, Captain, the engine 7, the engine 8 and 9 are blown. Where are we going to get parts? And this becomes the quest. And that's why we dub this now Astro Quest, because none of us are sitting here like, this is it. Because if any of us are, then we haven't learned the first principle. This is unbegotten. There is no that's it. See, the reality is that limitless doesn't contain such components, right? And then this is also the limitation of the consciousness before you go into the other side. And I'll sum it up as this. The consciousness here believes everything must come from something, leaving itself in a conundrum because where did the first one come from? That is the end of the knowledge here for man. So long. Later on, you find out about the unbegotten, meaning that there's another state of consciousness that simply says, everything comes from nowhere. That's how it became limitless. So it's the other way around. It's like instead of looking at it into one direction, you're on the other direction, and that's the direction that gives you something that is infinite. This is what can make a crippled climb trees. This is what can take an ordinary situation that seems to be doomed and then actually infuse it with what's necessary to emancipate it into an entirely different field. So it's a jump start then. What we're dealing with reality is we've allowed certain things to occur so that way when the pulse comes through that actually begins to enliven the being, it puffs out like something that was designed intricately. Because this is still a very intricate design. It just happens to contain a point of total domination by a subordinate part of our own system. Meaning that if you don't call in, as they say in the ancient text, there is one that said that it would not, meaning that there's a part of our consciousness that is not avowed to our progression. The reason why it was installed is it became an anchor point. This is why they like to call it negative. This is ground. It's when you say, I'm going to go and leave, it's what says you should not go anywhere, right? And then when you start to struggle against it and then you gain the strength to break free from it, now you actually have the fuel to get to where you're going. This can be seen also in other ways. It doesn't have to simply be seen in the lives that we live. It can actually be witnessed within multiple organisms that are living on the planet in their struggle, their plight. But the reality is that we're also sitting on the apex. You don't see these dogs and many of these other little creatures running around here with computers and stuff in their hand and getting ready to calculate the next level of the genome. So we can realize whose responsibility this would be. Because if we're still looking at any of the totems, they're polarized. And that's what gives us the system of the archons. Because sure enough, when that light shines through that prism, those 9 spectrums actually become archetypes and arc forms for different variations of the zodiac. And then again, you've got systems on 9, systems on 12. These are the updates to the system. Some people say, well, I thought it was only 7 chakras. Now you're telling me it's 9. Somebody says 144. These are updates to the system. But I tell you what, they're going in the wrong direction. Anytime you count up, you're going in the wrong direction. When people talk to me about 6, 6, 7, 6, 8 sense, I was like, man, they must don't understand it completely what goes on. Actually, all your senses collapse. The first one is you hear see. And this seems to work very well, especially for traveling interstellar space, because you actually go down the tube of whatever's making sounds and you can hear everything, meaning everything that makes a sound sends a vibratory tube and you can just travel right down through it. So this kind of introspection into the reality is what is needed in order to rejuvenate the youth within it, because they are holding the core of the cells of this reality, meaning that the energy has been entrusted to them. And that's why we see this massive level of birthing babies, but this inadequate level of actually being able to raise them. And then you have iPad and Disney and the rest of the
distractions,
the archon forms raising, right? And even deeper than distractions, but in a sense, sculptors. And it'd be easier to see them as such because they leave a residue. Like after the person is done being distracted, which is basically a pretense word that is a temporary moment, then there's still something left. And this is that's what a mark does, as you were talking about earlier, the mark of the beast, or the mark of basically any form that is being very rough and not dealing with a reality where there is more of what do you call that? Pediatric mind states that are actually in it. Now, here's the pediatric mind state, and this is what blow the mind sometimes. The pediatric mind state actually is father. Father makes up a time, and this is what I mean, I'm talking about primordial beings that have just basically put themselves into forces. Forces are what they are. They have not transformed and become multidimensional like us. So in every tense, if you were ever to see a symbol of them, the symbol would be of a child. And such is the intellect, such is the recklessness. So what we've actually, but that is still a sacrifice. And this is the other thing that we need to understand about what the Capricorn actually does sacrifice for the reality in order for us to one day gain a building block for where we can use it as our foundation. Meaning that still everyone needs to stop playing around. Much of what they read in the Bible and in the Quran end up leading them to start answering the speculations when they got pissed off at God. Because then once you get pissed off at God, that then leads you to try to figure out who the hell God is. So when you do all your when you do your dirty work, you make sure you're doing it on the right thing. And then if you're really persistent at it, because people that do this, by the way, they get hurt by God. And I'll explain that very seriously. It's when a person does end up believing in what goes on in the Bible and is devoted to it, reads through that, Pseudepigraphas, Apocryphas, all the rest of the books, and then finally starts realizing that the book is anything you make it. Meaning the Bible is actually set up in a way where anything you want to see, if you believe that before you open it, you'll see it. And I started noticing this phenomena, especially if you just wanted to believe certain things of a certain persuasion was true. And then so at the third time of reading it, it unlocked. And this means reading Numbers and Leviticus, because that's where all the codes are. But then the body will take this information, and I did this at 24. The body will take this information and then sit on pondering. Okay, processing. And then you won't hear back till 3 years later when you finally go through a spiritual traumatic tantrum all of a sudden. And then everything that's coming up on your HUD is saying you're in falsehood. These people are not who they say they are. Look, here's the phenomena. This is we're checking back here, checking back there. This is if you have a mind that is still alive somewhat and analyzing the situation going on around you that's supposed to be life, which they're, again, turning into a foul. It's all about you living the evil and that kind of stuff rather than our complete exploration and containing, in a sense, supremacy, in a sense, as a species, meaning us coming together as a supreme being, understanding that it takes all of us to be that. You cannot hold that in one mind. I've watched the phenomena take place when one individual ends up connecting with a stream that is too strong for their mind. It happens. You would never believe it could happen to you, though, meaning that many people on this planet, I would tell you, especially from saying certain words and certain combinations, certain things, especially involved in Judaism, have unlocked a certain primordial part of themselves in space age. Meaning that you're sitting here with an Archon and Gigi with an iPad. What are you doing? Meaning that you're in a reality. You have people that are practicing great deals of chaos magic within their own mind. You have them bringing things beyond the panorama, meaning bringing the archons beyond the place where they are supposed to be. This is a human or a hymen, a virgin planet, which is supposed to be here as a nursery or a garden to contain the seeds within it until they grow up to enough level to be basically pushed out the nest. We have things that have penetrated, and that's when they drop, when you live for the day when they drop the pyramids from the sky and the pyramids land on the ground and drill themselves deep into it and begin to worm, as they say, into the base of the ocean. Then you understand then the maritime law and the Merovingians who don't have a land because their land is sunk, so thus dock their vessels and their courthouse and their Orion-based geometry onto our land or our mother, and then punch in their acupuncture or their phallic symbols or poles, their tall buildings, and then begin to drain from the skeletal system or the skeletal system that they build the entire structure of their institutes with. And there are still those of us that are in the know. As I said when I first began this, the Stone Mountain granite is the same granite that they build all courthouses in all post offices with, and that is for a reason. Because while people are still worrying about Project Prism, which is basically a digital replication of something that's happening on a spiritual level, they're once again told, hey, look that way, and then the Jesuit hand that's hidden is still moving the pieces on the chessboard as the black and white snake battle it out using pawns. And then, so meanwhile, at the Batcave, sometimes, you're sitting back into all of this, and then you hit that ejector seat. And this is what people need to realize, is that your mind, to try to solve this problem, has been put under a great deal of strain. So other bodies are more equipped to deal with this. But if you never give them that opportunity, meaning you can even feel at times when you're thinking about something, especially for us great thinkers, right? But when you use your spirit to calculate it, which it generally has to do from the other side, though, because it definitely doesn't want to hear what you're saying in English. But when your spirit calculates it, it actually is able to use more like a quantum processor. Indeed, our memories are not in our brain. They're actually in our auric field, or that magnetic field that's around us. But what happens is when we come in contact with very large magnetic poles or bodies, then we can be wiped or basically changed into that pattern. And let me explain it just a little bit more simpler about what I was talking about, that pyramid.
Hey, Sevan, hold that one thought. We got 11 minutes till we roll into the recording.
Okay.
Excuse me. Hold that thought, because I want to pick up. Like I said, I want to let you roll tonight.
That's right. I'm gonna write it down.
Right on. Just want to remind people we got room for 12 people on the board for the rollover. You can call in at area code 661-467-2401. And of course, you can refresh the page you're listening on. If you don't see the Skype button there, refresh the page. You might have to do it a few times. Hit the Skype, and that'll bring you into the board. Like I said, we've got room for 12 more calls. For the rollover, just want to say a great big thank you to Paul Giovanni and the crew at criticalmassradio.co.uk. And anything you guys can do to help, it would be greatly appreciated in terms of donations to keep the boards alive. We're doing it together, and it's a beautiful thing. And I just love the fact I can bring you on tonight. And I also want to let you know we've got a few people with their hands up that want to ask some questions. And I've got 3 people. There was more earlier, but a few calls dropped off and came back on. But yeah, sure. Continue on there, and you decide when you want to have some questions for people or just comments or whatever. That's your call. This is your show tonight, so just let her roll. It's all yours again.
Well, we can actually definitely take some questions. I'm just gonna definitely finish this particular statement in a tense, because it is the kind of the closing down of that segment.
Yep.
And then what I'll do is I do have to kind of refresh myself for a moment, and then we can get right into the questions and handle because I'm sure the questions tend to take up a good chunk of time, especially if we
Well,
get on a good stream.
well, we got an hour and 10 right now, so yeah,
Okay.
whatever. We got room for 8 callers, so if people are 7 callers, there's room for 7 now.
Yeah,
6.
exactly.
I'm counting it down. 6. This board's lighting up real fast.
I wanted to tell you. Okay, so basically, these just to finish the symbol then, into how the symbols correspond with also structures or buildings, and how this has a magnetic connection, which we'll explain later on in this conversation, and why that's really important. But if you have, let's say, for instance, a pyramid that is built at a specific degree, if you make a duplicate of that, even if it's at a small scale, it attracts it is attracted by the larger one. So then what is created is just like a magnet. Like if you have a very strong N52 magnet and you have you have one magnet in one hand, one magnet in another, in between there is an invisible attraction line going on. You just can't see it. That obviously, if you pull those things a little closer, you know there's a force in between. And I just want to explain it very simple like that for people to also understand how geometric buildings become magnets and basically pipelines for a level of communication for individuals who know how to interface with that. And so this will start to lend a great deal of insight about the reincarnation station. How is it that light is generated and you're attracted back into another one of these rigged up worlds? Because as I said before, there is something very close to what we're experiencing in the reality, especially with our synthetic monetary system and what the universe is doing. But I didn't say it was doing it in not a corrupt way, because the universe is fair. The universe uses this specific math, and I'm going to just explain it very briefly. It's totally different than interest. It's actually opposite of interest. Interest works that if you, let's say, borrow $100 and the interest is 20%, you must pay back $120, right? But if you're borrowing money, where would you get that $20 from? And then we have the beginning of every single thing that me and you have been studying about these laws, promissory notes. I promise next lifetime, and all these different paperwork that's written on trees that hold the memory, because those seeds are strong and they keep reincarnating and keep bringing back those promises, right? So all of this connection that we have with the paper and the monetary situation. And let me grab the idea, because the idea just kind of jumped away from me for a moment. People are like, what was that? Let me grab it again. Again, the interest, okay, that is one direction. And this is why, at least what the Arabs are able to maintain off of that ancient knowledge that they still got most mixed up with, is that they know not to do interest, because it automatically starts to destroy things. So what is the other way? The other way is that whatever you earn, right, whatever you have, what if something came and just with something that looked like a cookie cutter with pie cuttings, like 1/4, 1/8, 1/3, okay? And they just stamped it over what you had, and it just took its portion. So that every time that it came back, it didn't really matter how much you had. It was always going to take its portion. So this is different than if you have to pay back something that you've borrowed. You see what I mean? So it's based on what you earn is what is paid. And so this is the direction, and I kid you not, it may take a lot of people a long time to figure that out. But once I realized that, I said, well, that's how the universe has set its scales. That's how it was able to keep balance, because in all of your thinking, the panacea should come into mind, meaning the thing that can cure everything. What is that? Well, there's a certain myth that goes behind it, was what Hermes was holding in his hand. It's that rod. But what does that rod do? It creates balance. Why? Because it doesn't matter what kind of archon, demonic, whatever you're dealing with in your mental structure netherworld, if you tap it with that caudacious that is balanced, it becomes balanced. And then it's basically neutralized. This is why the secrets of Rife were really that he knew the frequency of certain entities, and he knew how to cancel them out with their frequencies. So then those entities that were foreign to us, because they never lived in our system, decided a way to bring that frequency back out in another way, which like through the TVs and why they ride as we were at 88.5 or whatever it is to 107 or 108, why they ride that particular band. And why that band is still that same group that got together on the Mount of Harmon, which is the word harmony, and made that pack. Really, it was Semyaza, but convincing the rest of those very powerful beings that they should seed the planet without even knowing how to seed. And this became the ultimate sin. Sex, that's what the real connection is. You can't have sex and not know what you're doing. Nobody likes that.
So yeah, that kind of messes up for a lot of people.
Well, I mean, when the babies come out and then the first one is Cain, most certainly it will. And that's how the parable reads, meaning the first child is Cain, meaning the child came out imbalanced, thinking it was God. Now you have the identity of Yaldabaoth and God and the Tetragrammaton. So basically it's a deity, just like the Gnostic tradition says, that says, I'm God, I am that I am, and I'm the only one. But your fathers didn't know me by this name. And by the way, I'm not a jealous God, but you only will worship me. And by the way, I'm not the author of confusion, but let's go down and confuse them. And by the way, curses anyone that hangs upon a tree, but let me hang my son on a tree. And by the way, is Abraham and Sarah, or is it Abraham and Saraswati, or is it the 7 churches, or is it the 7 chakras? Is it John the Baptist, or you see, it goes on, or is it Oannes? I mean, is Oannes the one? Is the one still that archonic state of mind that thinks it's the only thing that exists? Now we got a full circle. Now you what is it? Circle, you serpent, eating your tail, the most ancient of us, by all means, the most smart about physical planes. That's why it's called serpent, because the pent is a pentagram, meaning this being knows about humans more than they know about themselves. And that's what I think the massive conspiracy theorist, the greatest one of all time, said. The problem is they know more about us than we know about ourselves. And that's a great disadvantage indeed. They know only more about what you think is yourself, which is that body, and that's because they will cut it open. That's why their symbol is a cross, but of course you turn it over, it's a sword, because that's the way they hold it, while they ask everyone else to hold it the other way, which will basically chop off your fingers. And if your fingers are a pentagram, then you have 5 senses then, because each of the points on the pentagram equal a sense, and then you hold the sword with your hands, then you're senseless. and that's really how it works. And then you end up running around a plane only functioning on 3 or 4 senses, either 2 or 3 senses, something unbalanced. It's basically when heart or liver or lung have taken so much damage because of what we've experienced in this chaotic field of us not knowing how to navigate and surf the cosmic weather properly, that we become callous and ice ourselves. And that's why money still runs through our veins as current, just as ice runs through our veins, as what slows us down. And it's like, but then the whole thing is magnificent. That's when I learned to leap. Like, you use your leap ability when you get in and you figure out all the information, and then you know it's about to come down on you or
Right.
up on you. And I guess I'll say in the last 90 minutes, when you know it's about to come down on you, that's when you leap out of there with extracting information to come to bring to the other parts of your body that you have to go into. So that's what's up.
Absolutely beautiful, and the board is full, and yeah, awesome,
All right,
awesome.
so we're gonna reset this thing because I saw it say 90 seconds. Are we?
No, no, no. That's you're just hearing what I
Okay,
hear
so
every night. Then we roll automatically into
60 seconds.
okay, awesome.
recording.
Yeah, I remember that.
So
Okay,
just
so why don't I do this? Why don't I just go ahead and take a quick refresher and then we start taking some calls?
absolutely, let's do that, and I'll I got the fort. Go do your thing, and just jump right back in when you're ready. Okay?
Okay, that's what's up. Thanks, Kate.
No worries. That's why we're here.
All right.
All right. Wow. I'm gonna say to everybody that I'm gonna wager that there's been a whole more dots connected for you, especially for anyone that's been tuned in at this table for any length of time and can speak in the fluent allegories, which many of you can. In some cases better than I. It's like Sevan was saying earlier. Some people, just pick up on things
10 seconds.
their own perspectives, and it's like I love being astonished, especially like I'll pop into Facebook and people will have posts put up, They'll have allegory breakdowns of things, and I'm looking at it going, "Look at you," you know. And that's what I mean. I mean, this is how I learn as well. We do this together. So, in as much as people expect me to come to the table and have this, that, and the other, well, I expect the same. This is about getting the balance, and there's nothing I love more than being the student, because the student, at the end of the day, well, I'll tell you. What makes a really, I'm sure this will work for you guys, I'll tell you, it made me a much better songwriter and performer when I took on the role of hosting songwriter cafes with my peers, especially people that, I looked at as amazing writers and amazing players, and you learn quick when you take on the role as a student teaching. And that's exactly how I treat this every night when I'm on the air with you guys. And I got to tell you, like, I'll be listening back to this show quite a few times, because I'm sure all of you understand and can get this. There has been a shit pile of information handed out tonight, and I don't know about you, but I was sitting as I was listening. It was I had a hard time, jumping from allegory to allegory to allegory constantly within 2 or 3 sentences. And by the time I'd want to ask something or it would come to mind, I'm already on the next thought. So this has been a powerhouse night. So I guarantee you, if at any point in the future you have any doubts, this is definitely a show you want to archive. And yeah, we got a full board tonight, boys and girls. So just waiting for Sevan to get back, and then I'm just going to open up. Tainda had her hand up first, and then I'm just going to go down the list and get your questions and comments as soon as Sevan is back at the board. So there you go. I'm just heating up the kettle right
now. I have one question from the chat room. You can put me in the queue. Thank you.
Oh, did I not? I opened your mic. That's why you're able to talk.
Well, it's not my question. It's somebody from the chat room.
Oh, that's fine. That's why I asked you to keep an eye on the room, and then you can come in and ask the question for them.
Well, when you're ready for a question, I have one.
Okay, you are question boss for the chat room tonight.
Yeah, I'm backed up. I got 150 questions.
Well, we'll give you one for sure.
That's sarcasm, by the way.
I know.
Kate?
Yeah.
Honey, would it be possible to read the lexigram I've gone? Because I'm only going to go, I really want to re-listen to this, but I'm going to go off to bed only because I've got the show and I've got loads to do in the morning.
Absolutely. And
so I would love to read him some lexigram that I've done.
Okay, and I just want to make sure he hears it, that's all. Sevan, are you there yet? Okay, I'll tell you what, you get first dibs, Moth, as soon as...
That Moth, she can really be a scene stealer, can't she?
Absolutely. And while we're at it, I might as well mention that right now, that tomorrow from noon to 2, Eastern Standard Time, 5 to 7 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, Wakey with Moth on criticalmassradio.co.uk. And I'm looking forward to that. Andrew is joining you tomorrow, yes? Andrew Norton Weber?
Yes, I'm hoping so.
Anything you want to add?
That's the plan. No, but tomorrow, last time it's at that time. The week after, it's going to be an hour later. It'll be from 6 to 8, so that'll be from 1 to 3 for you guys.
You've changed that. Okay, no problem. So
only tomorrow is normal time, and the next week will be later.
Oh, okay. So
tomorrow's the last one.
All right. So tomorrow it's 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard, 6 to 8 Greenwich Mean Time.
No. Tomorrow normal time, as it's been normal, noon till 2, and the next week it will go an hour ahead.
Okay. So next week. So again, 12.
TMI, too much information.
Yeah, it really didn't need to be said.
Okay. We were just spending time. Jane can come back. Is he back?
Yep.
Welcome to Confusion Factor.
Yeah, Confusion Factor 101. It's all good. It's all good. All right. Sevan, are you back yet?
Yep.
There you are. Okay. Moth has she's our word elf lexicogrammer, and she has a lexigram for you.
Awesome.
They sort of your name, James. So here we go. James von Bomar, Rome born, a Javanese verse man on a somber snare. No name above Rome. Miss, Mr. or Mrs. Seaman and Menses. A November man, a Mars man, a brave man in verbose verse. Remove the membrane, be reborn, no more name. Observe, see, jamboree, on an amber orb, mason's bees in mason jars. A sober man, an organ, beams 7 novas. An enema removes a mess, venom. An enema saves. Amen.
Nifty. A lot of it broke up, Moth, but no problem. If you can share the text with me, I'll pop it right over to Sevan so he can see what was in his name.
Okay, I will do. Yeah, and it was so funny how many of the things, as I'd already written them, he sent, which I thought was pretty cool. But there you go. That's life, isn't it? Ha ha.
I like the venom enema the best.
Yes.
Hey, the job's got to get done. They told me, well, who do you think we send in? Like sometimes you start questioning, like, okay, wait a minute, maybe I don't have the makeup for this. Like I don't get it. Like how am I, supposed to be emancipating consciousness when I'm still trying to expand into a certain level? And it's like, well, who do you think goes in? Not the person who's completely fresh to the entire situation, but the one that is actually endured through it and begin to expand from it. And that's something that I just every day in life I have to live that. So that's something that I set my system on that to keep expanding every day. Every time you run into me, you'll hear something new. I do definitely appreciate the poem of the anagram. I've obviously seen a great deal of what the name that I'm carrying, which is a fraud. No, I'm joking. Like I was listening to you earlier today, and you're like, oh, the name is a fraud, and it's dead, and et cetera, et cetera. And I was like thinking, there's this, each part of the name is a corpus in itself, as we know. Like that's what your work has revealed. And it becomes like if you even see some of the rarest names and you run them in Google, you'll find like 4 people with that name. And you're like, how could somebody? And this is that interconnecting web that I really, to me, to tell you the truth, it's something that we've earned. So we should not be so eager to give it away. And that's all I can really say about this, because you have to make a decision sometimes. You have to decide centrifugal, which way are you going this time? And that's called standard time. That's when that change is needing to be made. And it's like, no, not when you want to, but right now. This is the rule. And this is that whole Capricorn personality. And there's another level beyond that. And I want to make sure I get people that knowledge. You can either be the one that the Capricorn is exciting its order over, or you can be the Capricorn, but not being the Capricorn in the sense that you becoming it, and also all of the other parts of the spectrum, because each member of the zodiac is a part of a group or a band that in their relation they gain the whole of the hologram. And think about what I'm saying, meaning when you get into a group with any individuals and you guys are doing at least light communication, everything that they have, you have, and everything you have, they have, then that's added in with all subsequent beings that have connected. And then the ideas begin to bud off of the material that is developed within where the real essence of thought comes from. So this is why, we got into using cones, which was to accumulate this somewhat of ethereal matter into a shape that it could be directly useful to us. And we got into inserting. Some people, they crack me up. They think that the monatomic is the showbread that was being shown in the picture where they have the cone in the hand. The cone is the same cone in the hand that they're holding in the Sumerian picture, and that cone is about it's many things, but it's about the right type of vessel that is needed to insert or basically interface, like they say with the third in the spine. They find a sliver that has been put in, and that's how you interface with the being. This is more of like putting a mirror into someone's light system for a moment to bounce back off the light and then begin to extract the light. Meaning that this is the other side of the looking glass of what they're really talking about. It's when even in your hippocampus and the regions that project to you what you're seeing in this reality, there is a filter in there that is, in a sense, hacking how you're seeing it. That you can compensate for this by simply understanding that that's going on and loading that into your firmware. Meaning you have to compensate for, like, even when it's the full moon, you find yourself getting ready to go nuts. You have to say, look, it's the full moon. Why don't you go sit down? And then the body will say, okay. And then it goes and sits down. And you're like, wait a minute. Did you just say something? Meaning that your body has gained a certain level of consciousness. It has a stomach brain. It has a brain in the brain, obviously. And it has a heart brain. So it is a thinking entity that is learning from us. But this contract then creates why you have a shadow. And why the shadow, in a sense, is monitoring everything. There's like nowhere you go without your shadow, right? So this kind of reflection with the reality, there will be a day when you look in the mirror and there's nothing. There'll be a day that you look on the ground and there will be no shadow. There'll be a day that when you go to say something, if you ever thought about it, there will be nobody to listen because everything is inside. So nothing is separate, and that's how we have the most power and energy. But if we try at any point to take the real energies, I'm talking about Kundalini, the real Kundalini, or any of the Amazonian Dakini energies, etc., that belong to this planet. If we try to take any of them and don't know how to share, group share, I like to call it, and bring it out into the other vessels and fuel them with it, that means your return from the crown back into the lower kingdoms. If you don't understand completely how to do that, then somebody's breathing online. But if a person doesn't really understand how to do that, how to distribute back into their lower kingdoms what they've gained from their higher thoughts, then that is the lock and the block in the system. And so what we have to see is we have to see this in its true light, which is basically what it means to us. Meaning that we're only going to get the full spectrum light now is if we look at this reality and say, but yes, are you mad? Have you got to a point where you feel so uncomfortable with who you are that you cannot let it go, even if you found out it was an anchor? You can see these things on the astral plane. You can see connections that people have with things that they don't even understand that they're in communion with. So what I'm working with now is there's a simple thing here. It's about bringing up your vibratory frequency. It's about working with the body first. Why do you want to bring up the vibratory frequency? This is like literally pulling the ship away from the harbor. So all the ropes that are attached to it, because the auric field of the organism begins to vibrate, it basically, they snap off. The ones that are not resonant just break off. So this gives you a great deal of energy. Many people feel the release in the energy when they go through their system like this. But I suggest, since we become very physical, that we use complete internal cleansing systems in order to actually get our heart, our livers, our blood, and different things clean. Because you don't even treat your car like this. You don't drive your vehicle around and never change the oil or the transmission fluid. You can't. So what makes you think you can do that with the body if it's full of these filters? So then what happens is when you tune into, let's say, Jupiter, Mars, or whatever the planet may be, your view of that is distorted. And I've experienced this personally in my life. And the reason is because you're looking through a chakra where you're looking through basically the MK Ultra chakra. What they tell you about Jupiter. Jupiter means what? Wisdom. Let me show you this whole zodiac game. Jupiter means wisdom. That's really vague. What else about Jupiter? Because if we're on Earth, right, and then there's Jupiter and there's beings on Jupiter, when they say, what's going on Earth? Somebody's going to be able to say, well, they got different races. They like to fight a lot. They got these weird laws and rules, ethics, creed. They don't have attached to their real ability, but they're cute and they're cuddly and they have children and they will have a lot of data because why? We're really here. We really exist. So why is it when I ask about another planet and what's going on there, I get vague responses? This is called closed circuit. This is called where the communication is cut. You're dealing with Scythians in the system, cutting with the Scythian cable, the umbilical cord that you have to the connection of your memories or MEs. Then if you don't have any MEs, then you don't have any power because you don't know who you are, because every organism looks to see what it is first, what it used to be, and then it knows what it's to become. So then this means someone's got to then go down through the tunnels of time with one, like, sometimes you just got one match left. Trying to figure out where's the light switch. Basically, there is a brighter level of what we're experiencing here, which says, look, silly, you aren't scared of the dark. You actually can see far infrared. Now look, you'll see the data when the people put themselves into the black room experiment for 2 weeks, they start seeing far infrared. You come outside in the far infrared and you look at the sky and you can see the grid around the planet. It doesn't take any level of special abilities and powers and superheroes throwing lightning from their hands. And that's another thing. A lot of people's perception of what they should be on a spiritual level is based on a comic book. And that's a part of what MK Ultra did. It's so much more vast than that, but it involves introspection, not something that you're doing or acting upon with other individuals, especially if it's supposed to cause some phenomenon that gives you attraction, meaning that if you throw lightning from your hands, it's going to attract a lot of people. So you need to understand how to convert that energy, or else you become Jesus, the vampire. This is why when you understand the tradition of the cross and where it really trades back to, which they already show you, they wrote enough books about it, it stems back to one particular concept that always becomes a vortex. If you set yourself up as what people depend upon, across time and across the biorhythms, they're still pulling energy from you. So the best thing to do is to lead them within. Like they always say, don't give a person food, teach them how to make it or whatever. There's a saying that basically says you basically instruct a person how to do it themselves. That way they don't become dependent on you with it. Now imagine when you have millions of people, billions of lives and souls depending on you, what do you become? And so this is also what they call the gift and the curse. So you have to understand the plight of, the Jesuit hidden hand. The curse is that they gained the world and then they lost their souls. They wrote the curse. So that whole interaction lets you understand. It's when one makes a decision and says, this is what I want to be. I want to be base pillar. I want to be Saturnalian. And then they take that role and then they plant themselves as a tree. This is and then again, let me tell you the purposes of this. The purposes of planting oneself at a tree like a tree at times becomes when you know there's a cosmic storm coming. Meaning that when you know that the consciousness of what everyone used to be is about to get blown away. We're living in a world that's happened, but yet the trees still retain their knowledge. Meaning that every time that we go into nature and then we go back into the laboratory, we find a plethora of organisms and different things that we can cure ourselves with. It's funny now because if you look at Amazon, all it's full of is all these herbs and elements that seem to all do the same thing. Helps with blood circulation, gets rid of toxins. And I'm like, why don't somebody just say everything in nature is good for you instead of like trying to sell these people on this expensive bag of goji berries? If the reality is that we have some space to climb. And instead of kicking others that are below us down the ladder, I suggest we give them a pull up. If some of us are strong enough to put people even and beings on our back and begin to climb up, and that burns off the impurities of what they've accumulated. See, in anything that's in a dark area, it starts to accumulate a bacteria and a fungus and a virus, right? So what do you think happens on the spiritual plane when you have basically dimensions that are created on vortexes, concave triangles that have vortex magnetic traps? Then you have beings that don't have enough spin or enough propulsion to actually get themselves above the speed of light. Then it's like, then you look back at humanity and you watch them, like it's like then you look in the face of your mother then and you see her struggling to get herself out of the vortex trap and then telling you, help me. I gave you something. You ate from me. That's why Earth can call on any being that's ever been through here. If you ever think you're magnificent, guess what? Earth calls in a favor. But the other unfortunate part is, still takes a vessel. Those who cannot contain all the self-consciousness will short circuit. It's a phenomenon. I can't explain to you how we're capable of doing it. I can only tell you that I've done it myself. There's something that happens that when you start going into a vibration, then all of a sudden something kicks on and you can't stop it. And then at a certain point, you feel your entire system turn on. And generally, there's different things that happen for different people after that.
Gee, that's almost why I felt most of my life that feels like Mama Gaia has pulled in a favor. That's why I'm here, you know?
Right. Like
I owed her one.
If you can connect it, and if anyone has the story, then the story is yours. See, what they're trying to tell us is that any powerful idea you can take for yours, and you can actually empower yourself with it if you believe you're able to accomplish it. And it's like, so we share these kind of concepts and ideas, but we take them beyond concepts and we bring them in the real world. Is this real world or exercise? Man, this is real world. This is actual world. I bring the emancipation of the entire species on a platter. I'm only formulating everything in a very sequential level, so that way it actually makes sense. Even these conversations now, they're loaded. Obviously, we're having this kind of conversation because the audience is much more adept, but it's loaded with so many corpuscles.
I've already told everybody you're going to want to download this and listen to it 3 or 4 times.
3 or 4 times, man.
Yeah, because of
like he was talking about this. Oh, he was. I think he meant this. Then there becomes an argument. And people need to realize, look, these conflicts as light workers, realize that take back the control point of what you're actually attracting, because you have to get off the pole. Now, this is why at the elections, right, there's a ballot, who's the female version. And then, of course, there's an election, meaning there's an erection. Then there's a demon, and then there's a reptile or a Republican or a Democrat. And this is how you have the entire political system set up. And then you have the police, who are the ones who intervene when you need to be knocked to one side of one pole or the other. And then you have them playing pole position in the entire game. Phallic stuff. Now, now we have to see that, look, straight and narrow is the way. These guys, meaning good black snake, white snake, Cain and Abel, and black Abel, black Jesus, lions and stuff in the jungle, and then all the rest of the magnificent stories about what's going on Terra. When we have a crisis, we have to learn how to, okay, let me pause that and get into actuality. And this is what I meant earlier about those who have this reality where they come into like a role-playing game. Role-playing game is simply summed up as this: when you're not being you. So from there, it's like everyone's playing a role-playing game then. And so when it's time to either master the game or sign out altogether, this is when you get this kind of phenomena of people like Kate and people like me talking about the massive subject that it seems like TED Talk is still yet to have someone discuss without banning them off the platform. You see what I mean? And then this is another thing about, you see, we're dealing also with principalities. And this only means that you have those that are moving as gases and vapors. You have those that are moving on physicality. You have those that are moving on the spiritual realm. So this is why you girded yourself up in a certain tense where you actually strengthen all your posts. This was very simple for being that new shapes that basically give you infinite control. And this is also what that logarithmic spiral or egg type of shape does. It basically allows you to use the negative energy as fuel, as wood is used for fuel for a fire that burns up impurities and creates a hearth within the system that becomes its engine room. Not a dank bacteria, Koopa infested reptilian zone with viruses metamorphosizing at a rapid rate. You see what I mean? Not where they're calling from the sky, full quarantine, we don't think we can do anything to help. But the reality is that this is the kind of thing I get involved in. Like as they say, the Krishna said, when there's death, pestilence, when there's death, pestilence, and evil, and jealousy and hatred, I reincarnate. Meaning that's generally the time that we wake up. I'm not saying somebody saying, well, he called himself Krishna. Look, all is self. I'm telling you, there is a point in time where you wake up And you're like, oh, shoot, I can't even afford to sit on the throne here. And then you realize you're not even on the throne anymore. You realize someone stuck a mirror in front of you and you went into a narcissistic mode on yourself, then tesseract yourself into a three-dimensional reality where everything looks beautiful to you when it's actually distorted because nothing is symmetric.
Yeah, that's exactly why I tell people, don't even think of putting me on a pedestal. No. No, this is a level table. We all sit level across from each other, empowered as the gods we are.
Sure.
I just want to get some questions in.
Let's do it.
We got 35 minutes, if you guys can keep it brief, it'd be great. Tainda, you were, and Miranda, if you wanted to just say a cheery pip Tara, because you've got to be up early tomorrow, get ready for the show.
Yeah, nighty night, guys, to you all. Thank you so much. It was brilliant, James. Bye.
Okay, wholeness.
Awesome. Thank you, Moth. Appreciate it. Tainda, you've had your hand up the longest.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I just want to say, first of all, I really appreciate everything you have said, and it totally resonates with me and my life. The question I have, the other side, they, and I told the group here before, I've been told that I stink spiritually. They can see me coming. So when I astral travel, even in my daily life, if anybody is carrying that, it will let me know that it's there. And literally the spirit inside the person, I see inside. What tool can I use, especially astral travel, where my experience, they'll come in, and it's not nice things that they do, or that I have to stop them from doing, because I never consent to it, and I understand that. But how can I make myself where I'm not so noticeable? I guess that's what I'm trying to say, to get through so I can see my futures and do the things that I need to do.
Very good question. That's interesting because it actually is, in certain senses, the identity of the body. We learned that what happens is that even when talking, there's a certain amount of energy that comes out of you. And most people experience that when they do any kind of meditation, and you get in that Zen moment zone, and then you have to come out of it, and then you're walking around, you're silent, and then somebody wants to communicate with you, you know they're going to do it, and they start talking to you, and then you start telling them your insight, and then you actually seem to feel it all start coming out of you, and then after you're done, you're kind of tired, and then you go on from there. And this is because the containment. Now, I started realizing, especially when going into higher fields of energy, that what was also important is for us to understand the concept of something like a battery, meaning that you actually have to store the energy. So how does a battery store energy? How does it know when not to have too much energy, which will cause the battery to explode, or when it just doesn't have enough and it needs to fill up to a certain point? This is somewhat of the visualization, although a very crude one, of what you're dealing with, meaning that when your energy is flying out, it is very easy, because what you really want is you want that anything that you engage with, there is a meaning to it. And that's pretty much what you're looking for. I call it the highway of life. And because you don't really want to get off the highway, because that is where all the bridges come, and that's how your expansion and things take place. And so it's basically making sure that you're not attracting what it is that you wish to repel. And so that gets us into the energy system and kind of what we're really doing, like how much we understand about our energy system in itself and how that's based on our actions. And this is when you start seeing that the body, even having one, it's not Tamagotchi, meaning it's not that little thing that it's a thing you feed, and it's a digital little thing they used to make, and there's like a digital pet. It's actually a living, breathing organism. So how much time you have to even spend making sure that you don't come out of balance and start messing up your cells and your fuel cells, basically, and that would pretty much fill up a great deal of your life and your existence. The good thing, though, is that once you become more proficient at it, it's really good for you to keep online. But look at it as now a new day, where you have to go into the body first and clean the filters, which means that you do need to actually clean the organs in the proper order. So that way, when you look through those lenses, because they're indeed the chakras or the worlds that you have access to, when you are able to cross over, you don't cross actually out, you go in. So it's more like an inversion. And this is, again, the secret of the tesseract and how the body is turned back inside out. And then then there is where many things that you've already expanded into and created are. And, this becomes not something that someone can tell you specifically then after that what you should be experiencing, because then they would be intruding on you. It'd just be what you expect to see when you know that your system is coming to some level of correction, especially with its energy centers.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, awesome question.
So yes. Okay. I was just wondering, but how would I find out the order to clean the organs? I don't know.
If you go onto the site, there's internal cleansing kits that are there, and even if you don't actually patronize them, get the book, because the book is for free. It's actually there to download it, and this is on the astroquest.com, and then you just go to products, you go to internal cleansing, and you'll see it there. But read the book, and then it'll show you the order that they actually use to cleanse the system. And this is very proficient, by the way. That's how you get control over this thing again, because if you sometimes try to do it on the spiritual level, and oh my goodness, please not the mental level, and you have a physical situation going on, this has proved to be almost the undoing of anyone that ever thought that they were going to come and do something for humanity. Meaning, if in the first part of the message people don't get how to actually maintain the vehicle, it can control our consciousness based on things that are suggested to it that are written in programs that you may not know. Meaning that there are things that you may ingest in the reality that throw your system haywire and turn it outside. So thus, a very brilliant energy doesn't have its chance to accumulate and start budding into, what this is actually going to do. It allows you to make decisions very fast that are going to equal you getting to the level that you need to get to. And on top of that, it repels roads and paths that are zigzagged. Basically, they're going to kind of take you there, but not really get you there. Like, the beginning of the Masonic book Freemasonic book tells them that we don't have the truth. We can show you how to get to it.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about all the time, and I find it to be, for me, the most powerful is just looping urine therapy. For me, it's just absolutely
heard about that.
Purified. So, I've got 954 area code. I've got your mic open. We want to get a half an hour, and I want to get everyone in. We got 3 others after you. So, area code 954.
Thank you for the question, also.
Yeah. So there you go. Jump in. You're in.
Wholeness family. This is Chakudi calling.
What's up, Chakudi?
I just had, what's going on, brother?
I know you had to take advantage of the transmission.
There you go.
Most definitely.
Welcome.
Brother, I had one question about circumcision and the metaphysical effects on it.
Oh man, that just came up today, man. Why? See, you had to go do it on air. You had to go. But this just came up today, man, because me and Tom were in here talking about, we were on, I actually have a recording that I intended to play on this show, and I got to just get it to you. Maybe you could source it to your fans.
Hey, Sevan, my friend, this is a 7 days a week event.
Yeah.
Whenever you get the energy,
just dive in.
Just all you need to do is let me know, and same day, it doesn't matter. That's why I run open forums.
Right.
I would love to have you come on as many times as you feel you want. Please.
Nice. Okay, for sure. I'll definitely choose to take on that invitation at
times. Take advantage of it, baby.
When we have so many different things to talk about, and I just want to get it out to more people than just our circling network. But here's the thing. I do want to answer that question about the circumcision, because it was something that came up today. And what this is about now, you see how there's a feminine energy that does attract on the dimension, and many of these feminine energies connected to great deals of power that slam archons to the ground. But also there seems to be a phenomena that continuously takes place, which is very similar to a relationship, that a masculine spirit or just one pole ends up with another pole if it doesn't keep coming into agreement. This means that even in Christianity, there's Sophia. Even in different traditions, traditions, you have Sarah, you have all these different female type womb structures that basically are always in contact with the person as a hive. So through a hive, it's like a queen in the hive. But again, to try to confuse this for being a human woman, you really be selling yourself short. It's a very massive concept here of something that is beyond feminine and masculine, but does have a womb. And so what you deal with then is that because there are at least 9 of these, even though some people would love to say it's just 7, the reality is that you see 9 wombs coming out of the spectrum, or 9 portals. So what this means is that there are 9 of these kinds of energies that kind of create the temperament of what is going on in this reality. And they're also connected very heavily with the weather and tempest or temptress, etc. So what happens here is that you had a certain level of complete devotion to some of these energies where the masculine, or that particular pole would say, I commit myself to you for the rest of my existence here. And then this energy, of course, being very adept, saying, well, if you, and this, of course, it happens again more to males, obviously, but there is female circumcision. But then there is but actually female castration. This is what it ends up leading to in the old days when these type of pledges were made from an individual to their particular deity. And so what you were dealing with is that if you said you're basically you Deva, you are my only Deva, and then the devil would say, then basically castrate yourself, like become an eunuch for me, become a high priest. And that's why Jesus says in there, the eunuchs are even higher in a certain tense. They become the high priest because they become, he said, yes, and sure, you should even strive to become eunuchs for God, meaning you should basically castrate yourself for the deity by basically cutting yourself off.